Hello, everyone. Omni-sensei here with What If I Were Reborn in MHA as Kirishima? Part 3. If you enjoy this content, smash the like button. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to check out the original story linked in the description.
There was a bell beside the time-worn door. It was a modern convenience that clashed with the building's antique appearance. A device that, by its very nature, suggested one should knock and call for a servant in a loud tone. Perhaps that contrast was inevitable when past and present collided. When Kirishima pressed the bell, a woman's voice answered from within. "Who is it? Good afternoon. I have an appointment for today. My name is Kirishima Ijiro." "Ah, you must be the one my father mentioned. I'll open the door for you." "Thank you." As he watched the door open automatically, Kirishima mused whether this contraption represented a harmonious blend of eras or merely a crude modern mechanism draped in a historical guise. But it wasn't a matter worth dwelling on. He quickly shook off the thought and stepped inside. A meticulously maintained garden greeted him. Following the stone path for a short while, he soon found a woman waiting by the entrance. She appeared to be in her 30s, her refined features radiating an elegant beauty. "Nice to meet you. I'm Srikwang Saki, the eldest daughter-in-law in this household." "Pleasure to meet you too, Miss Saki. As I mentioned earlier, I'm Kirishima Ijiro. My father mentioned that a young friend would be coming, though I didn't expect you to be this youthful." "Haha. If you must be precise, I wouldn't say I'm young so much as still a child. I'm only 14. "Oh my, 14? You're in middle school, then? I assumed you'd simply looked youthful." Kirishima chuckled at Saki's astonishment. By now, it was a familiar reaction. People were often incredulous when a middle schooler traveled alone and stayed in various places for days on end. Even in his previous life, where the world wasn't plagued by villains, it was unusual for a middle schooler to roam so freely, so the reaction was understandable. "I'm in the 3rd year of middle school and will be entering high school next year. Since my birthday hasn't come yet this year, I'm still 14. "That's impressive. I'd never have the heart to travel alone. It's not about being impressive. I simply have something I want to achieve, and I believe I can do it." "That determination is admirable. Honestly, the way you talk, it reminds me a lot of my father." "You mean Srikwang?" "Yes. He used to recount his youth in much the same way, saying it wasn't about greatness but simply about doing what one could." "I see. Oh, is the old man available now?" "Oh dear. Excuse me. I got carried away talking and left you standing here. My father is in his room. Let me take you to him." "Yes. Thank you." Following her petite figure, Kirishima was led into a modest room. From just outside the door, she announced, "Father, your guest has arrived." "Is that so? Please, come in." A thick, deep voice resonated from behind the door. With his heart pounding, Kirishima stepped through the door that Saki had opened. Inside sat an elderly man of small stature. His frame, modest and slightly underwhelming compared to the taxi driver's description, was offset by eyes that burned with a piercing intensity. Those eyes still carried the fire of youth. "Good afternoon. My name is Kirishima Ijiro. It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm Srikwang, call me Samit. That's easier for me. Now sit down." "Understood, Samit. Saki, you may leave. I have something to discuss with this boy." "Yes, father." After dismissing Saki, Samit scrutinized Kirishima from head to toe. Although his manner might have seemed brusque, Kirishima understood the unspoken message and met his gaze steadily. Samit clicked his tongue before speaking. "I'm sorry for making you stand when I'd asked you to sit, but could you please stand up and remove your top?" "That'll do." "Understood." Kirishima complied without hesitation, revealing a physique sculpted as though by a divine artisan. With a sharp gaze, Samit rapidly inspected every part of his body. His eyes lingered appreciatively on the unusually developed triceps and the well-defined serratus muscles before he issued another command. Now, turn around. When Kirishima obliged, his deltoids and lats came into clear view, their contours unmistakable. Samit clicked his tongue again as he noted the rigid spinal erectors standing firm like steel columns. TCH, for a kid, you've built an impressive body. This isn't just for show. You've clearly been training your striking for a long time. Who taught you? I taught myself. Unable to reveal his past life to Samit, Kirishima lied, insisting he was self-taught. Samit's eyes widened in surprise. What? You did it all on your own? Yes, I trained by watching boxing videos, filming myself, comparing the recordings with the original footage, and adjusting my technique accordingly. Ha! I used to think any kid who reached out to learn Muay Thai these days was just an oddball, but this is beyond that. You're truly exceptional. No one sane could achieve such a physique on their own. Haha, perhaps a bit so? I aspire to be a hero. Since my quirk makes my body tougher, I needed to learn how to fight. I can't just stand there and take every hit. So necessity drove you? That can't be the whole story. True enough. Samit let out a short laugh as Kirishima assented. It was evident that his development wasn't the result of a day or two of training. Every inch of Kirishima's body was a testament to years of relentless self-improvement and struggle. And yet, somehow, Samit found himself relating to the young man's journey. Bine, whatever else drove you, when you have a passion, you must learn and adapt to it. I was the same once. You too, Samit? Yeah. Now, put your shirt back on and sit down. You're distracting me. Complying with his instruction, Kirishima quickly redressed and sat down once more. With a distant, wistful look, Samit continued his tale. I grew up in a poor family, and back in Thailand, there were only a handful of ways for a poor kid to make something of himself. Thailand must have been rough then. It was chaotic, no doubt. But when I was young, things were relatively decent. The royal family was still intact, and although politics were turbulent, it wasn't the worst. So I turned to Muay Thai. It was the only way to earn a good living and make real money. Simply, I did it out of necessity. I heard that, in ancient times, like very long ago, Muay Thai was incredibly famous. It was. Thailand and Muay Thai were almost synonymous. Even in my youth, while it hadn't reached the heights it once had in the era before quirks, it still held considerable prestige. That's why being a NAK Muay could pave the way to success. I can hardly imagine such days now. Nowadays, sports are nearly extinct. Martial arts are even rarer. And what is a quirk? Really? It's true. You hardly see anyone still practicing martial arts. And finding someone to teach them is even more challenging. I don't even teach these days, so don't get your hopes up. Mostly, it's because you're such an unusual brat that I even considered it. Honestly, I hadn't planned on teaching you a thing. Huh? I wouldn't dare tell you how to do things, Samit, but that sounds a bit unfair. Don't get shocked, kid. When I said I wasn't planning to teach, I meant that I wasn't opposed to it now. I figured some kid had wandered in here trying to play the otaku. Ah, right, an otaku. He laughed heartily before continuing. Even if our time is short, I'll make sure to teach you the essentials properly. So don't worry. Besides, Muay Thai turned out far better than I expected. I had talent. In fact, to be brutally honest, I was a genius. I debuted at the age of 10, knocked out opponents my own age, and went on a winning streak ever since. Wow, starting at 10. That's extraordinary. Listening to him, Kirishima couldn't help but think that Muay Thai in this world was much the same as it had been in his previous life. There had long been debates about whether very young children should participate in money matches, and although outsiders would criticize, for the children it was a matter of survival. Not really. Back then, any kid aspiring to be a NAK Muay was already fighting by that age. Some even started earlier. That must have been a harsh world. It only seems harsh in retrospect. You say that because you grew up in a safe place. Honestly, even then, when you compared Thailand to the Middle East or Africa, it was nothing short of paradise. Well, that's true. Anyway, I was doing quite well back then, winning match after match until I eventually became a Lumpini champion. Lumpini was Thailand's largest arena at the time, wasn't it? Exactly. To be called the Lumpini champion meant you were the world's best Muay Thai fighter in your weight class. It was my golden age. A golden age. Even now, when I close my eyes, I remember it vividly. The intense lights cascading from the ceiling, the familiar sound of whistles and drums across the ring, and the roar that shook the entire arena. Those were the moments I cherished. I can only imagine how incredible that must have been. It was. When I knocked an opponent to the ground, walked to the neutral corner, and took it all in with every fiber of my being, I felt like the king of that ring. I was a god in that moment. Kirishima felt a kinship with Samit's reverence for those memories. Despite the blasphemous way he dismissed them, he too had felt that surge of power. When he had knocked down a ferocious attacker and surveyed the arena from above, he was not merely surviving. He was conquering, reigning supreme. The kid once chased into the gutter, and the young man left stranded with no one to lean on no longer existed in that moment. There, on the ring, Kirishima was both conqueror and ruler. In his past life, the memory of that exalted moment kept him returning to the ring time and again. Even when he had amassed enough wealth to live luxuriously for generations. Now, as a reincarnated soul enjoying a satisfying life, that old obsession had naturally faded. Yet his desire to become the strongest still burned within him. For a time, it was wonderful. A pauper rising to become a champion, living large. But then war broke out. A full-blown civil war. The fragile peace between the civilian forces and the military, reluctantly held together by the royal family, shattered. That must have been incredibly difficult. It was. Every match was cancelled, but that wasn't the worst of it. When the Civil War began, fighting erupted everywhere. Bullets flew, and though the civilians were poorly armed, they fought back with their quirks. It was utter chaos. I kept hoping that one day the fighting would end and peace would return. But then, forces attacked the royal palace, annihilating the royal family. That's when I realized, if they could slaughter royalty without a second thought, someone like me wouldn't be spared either. An age of chaos, indeed. Exactly. That's when I decided to leave Thailand. I mulled over where to go, and back in my day, some seasoned NAK Mui had fought in Japan. They recommended the country, said it was good and clean. So that's why you came here? Right? I picked up a few words of Japanese and made my way here. Japan wasn't as peaceful as I dreamed, but I was satisfied. At least the nation wasn't split and consumed by bloodshed. I also heard you took down some villains here? HM? How did you hear that? It's not exactly something I go around boasting about. Samit furrowed his brow as he replied. Seeing his skepticism, Kirishima responded with mild confusion. A taxi driver mentioned on the way here that you'd cleaned up this entire area. He seemed pretty proud of you. TCH, I don't know who he was. What's there to boast about? Keeping the neighborhood clean is only natural. The locals lacked the strength, and I had it. It's nothing more than that. Sure, it was technically against the law, but I'm not one to feel boastful or ashamed about doing what needed to be done. I see. Anyway, after coming to Japan, doing a bit of cleaning, and somehow things falling into place, I ended up living in this large mansion. I even got married unexpectedly and had children. Now I have grandchildren. TCH. I suppose you must be tired of hearing an old man's life story. Not at all, it was fascinating. Flattery aside, enough talk. You're probably relaxed now, aren't you? Let's see what you're capable of. You might be all muscle and no substance. Yes, though I'm more than just muscle. I won't believe it until I see it with my own eyes. And you said you taught yourself, right? Enough chatter. Let's go. With a powerful voice, he rose from his seat. Without missing a beat, Kirishima followed him as he opened the door and headed off. Watching the straight, unwavering stride of the old hero, even at his advanced age, Kirishima's anticipation swelled. Though his build was not large, the intensity radiating from his proud posture was unmistakable. It was the resolute back of a true hero of yesteryear. There was a training area inside the mansion. Kirishima felt a familiar comfort at the sight of sandbags, shin guards, and hand wraps hanging everywhere. Even when he had been studying karate in Tokyo, it had been a welcome experience in its own right, though that setup was a world apart from a boxing gym. A Muay Thai training space, on the other hand, bore a much closer resemblance to one. It was a shame there weren't any speed bags or similar equipment. Samit turned to Kirishima and said, "All right, show me what you've got. If you're truly confident, you won't embarrass yourself by flailing your hands and feet." "Haha, don't be too surprised," came the reply. Kirishima began to loosen up. Samit observed intently as Kirishima methodically warmed his entire body and began stretching with meticulous care. At least he's got the basics down. The technical side I'll judge for myself, self-taught after all, Samit thought silently. While Samit silently scrutinized him, Kirishima finished his stretching. Then, with a calm, steady gaze, he assumed his stance. Closing his eyes for a moment to focus, he sprang into action. Both feet pushed off the ground in a rhythmic, almost dance-like cadence. The power rising from his lower body surged upward through his waist, moving smoothly yet with steely determination. His punches, launched from his shoulders, synchronized perfectly with his footwork. The entire sequence of movements transcended sound, unfolding like fragmented frames in a low frame rate film. What the hell is this kid doing? Has he deceived me? Samit was dumbfounded by Kirishima's display. He maintained a stern expression, though inside he nearly wanted to scream. The sight before him was utterly baffling. Martial arts cannot be mastered in isolation. Without guidance, one cannot learn the proper stance, and all too easily, one's technique can fall to shambles. Not having anyone to correct your mistakes is a trap far more dangerous than it appears. Believing that a wrong approach is right will leave you more exhausted in the end than not trying at all. Samit assumed that Kirishima's methods were no exception. He had expected only an amateur burdened with a few bad habits. Yet once the performance began, his expectations were utterly shattered. "Stop! Were you lying to me?" "Huh? I haven't told any lies," replied Kirishima. "Then what was that just now? You said you're self-taught. How else could you move like that? If you were merely an ordinary ex-pro, I might understand. But this is something else entirely." Despite the rebuke, Kirishima understood Samit's frustration. Truthfully, even Kirishima was baffled. The display before him was the kind of refined skill that could only come from years of grueling training under an exceptional master, even for someone of world-class talent. Even that would have been an arduous feat. If it were simply a matter of natural speed and strength, Samit wouldn't have been so shaken. After all, raw speed and power can be enhanced with a quirk anytime. What truly mattered was technical precision. Every technique Kirishima executed was at a master's level. In particular, his straight punches were nothing short of spine-tingling. "No matter what you say, I truly taught myself. There isn't even a boxing gym where I live. And it's not as if some reclusive legend secretly trained me. Do people like that even exist these days? I really learned it all on my own." "You're telling me you truly taught yourself? Without any help?" "Yes. I haven't met another boxer besides myself. I learned the fundamentals by watching instructional videos, mimicking them, and then filming myself to compare. For application, I studied old boxing matches." "Is that for real?" "Ha!" Samit let out a frustrated sigh. Observing a master shadow box, one can almost discern the imagined opponent. Having reached a level where few could outmatch him, Samit knew exactly what that meant. Kirishima moved as though he were up against a world-class adversary. If he were to be believed, it was likely modeled on one of the boxers from those videos. But could mere observation truly bring forth such mastery? The kid was nothing short of extraordinary, even before quirks reshaped the world. When martial arts reigned as a colossal global enterprise, this boy could have claimed the title of the world's best. Although Muay Thai was his primary art, like many NAK Muay, he had also ventured briefly into boxing. He had even managed to attain commendable results. Even Samit could see that what the boy displayed was that of a great champion whose name would echo through history. And to think he had accomplished it all by himself. Is it truly possible for a 15-year-old to achieve this? Still, I put in an incredible amount of effort. I started training at the age of 2, and I've lost count of how many times I replayed my recorded form to perfect it. I'm not exaggerating. No, Keith, that doesn't make it possible. How's that supposed to work? Samit's feelings grew complicated as he watched Kirishima answer with a nonchalant indifference, as if he were deliberately playing dumb. Samit, who was born and raised in Thailand, remembered that back in his day, Muay Thai was one of the few ways for a poor child to turn their fate around. Numerous children had attempted it, many failed, yet most survived. Thailand was a breeding ground for prodigious talent, and Samit had once been among its very best. Even Samit considered this performance to be utterly anomalous. He appeared as though he were the living incarnation of martial arts. One might have thought a devil had bestowed upon him an otherworldly blessing at birth. There was simply no other explanation. So that's how it is. How's that supposed to work? You've rendered me speechless. I once answered a man who asked how to become strong, much like you did. I explained as best as I could, yet he still didn't understand. And now, you've left me equally dumbfounded. Oh, I'm sorry if that offended you. No need to apologize. I'm not upset. When I was in my prime, I might have been jealous or even angry, but now that I'm 76, having lived through spring, summer, and autumn, I only feel astonishment and disbelief. That's a relief. Samit let out a soft chuckle at Kirishima's words. Then, with eyes blazing, he said, "This is getting interesting. I never cared about preserving martial arts the way others do. To me, it was merely a tool, something I honed out of necessity in a world overflowing with people who have quirks. I learned it so I could live well and enjoy life. So I figured that if no one were left to carry it on, it might as well vanish. Isn't that natural? Only what is useful and strong survives. Martial arts, however, seldom do." I see. When you put it that way, it does sound persuasive. Still, I think our era relies too much on quirks, so much so that even those whose abilities could benefit from martial arts don't bother learning them. That's true enough. I'm not here to debate what's right or wrong. I simply don't have time for that. The important thing is, I never intended to teach Muay Thai in the first place, but you've convinced me. I'm glad to hear that. I traveled all this way, and it would have been a real disappointment if I had come away empty-handed. It's all thanks to your skill. Honestly, I never imagined a kid like you would be born in this era. If you have any sense at all, you'll know that you're beyond the ordinary, and I can't wait to see what the world intends for someone like you." He grinned. For a man past 70, he looked almost mischievous. That smile carried an intense anticipation. Kirishima returned the smile and replied, "Haha, even if you say that, I'll live the way I want. Of course, I have no intention of doing anything evil. That goes without saying. People should live true to themselves. You taught yourself boxing because you wanted to, didn't you? And needless to say, you have no reason to commit evil. At first glance, villains may seem to thrive, but in the long run, righteousness always stands tall. That's true. Perhaps it was his age that made Samit speak in such winding terms, but Kirishima nodded in agreement. Humanity, over the long haul, has always trended upward toward a better future, toward more peace, toward a higher ideal. And yet, within the span of a single lifetime, the world remains awash with misfortune and tragedy. He did not intend to ignore that reality and focus solely on dreamlike ideals, and Samit likely didn't mean it any differently. A man who had clawed his way through chaos would not be easily swayed by lofty ideals. I seem to have gone off on a tangent again. Old age, you know. Anyway, what I want to say is this. I've decided I want to teach you properly. So pay close attention and note well who your teacher is. After saying that, Samit stepped up in front of the sandbag. He closed his eyes for a moment and took a deep breath. Amid the quiet rhythm of his measured breaths, he opened his eyes and adopted his stance. It resembled a boxing stance, but his lead foot pointed directly forward and his center of gravity was noticeably higher. His feet were positioned closely together, and his hips faced squarely ahead. That posture spoke clearly of his mastery in Muay Thai. Even at an age when most would be contemplating life's final chapters, his stance was so impeccable that not a single opening could be found. Kirishima watched Samit's form, pondering what he might do if he were in his place. With half-closed eyes fixed on the sandbag, Samit said in a measured tone, "Your punches were impressive. Honestly, they nearly knocked my eyes out of their sockets. I never imagined that a 15-year-old in this era could put on a display like that. You gave me a fine show, so now it's my turn." No sooner had he finished speaking than he launched into a kick. His right hand swept upward diagonally as the right side of his torso rotated slightly to the left. At the same time, the inside of his left foot planted firmly on the ground, facing forward. As his right hand descended, his right foot forcefully pushed off the ground and sprang upward. His previously contracted left side extended fully as his hips turned over. In that fluid motion, his shin traced a beautiful diagonal arc, striking the sandbag like a flash of lightning. The sandbag, having absorbed a nearly flawless kick, folded in with a resounding roar. Even though it was a premium sandbag filled with sand only in its center and lower sections, it split deeply, spilling sand everywhere. Well, not bad, right? This old man's kick can still pack a punch. Samit said this to Kirishima with a playful smirk. Kirishima regarded him once again, now with a new appreciation for the man before him. In his previous life, spanning 18 years, and in this one another 13, a total of 31 years of relentless training had distilled into what many mistook for a simple 1-2 combo. That technique, the very foundation of his boxing, was both his beginning and his end, nothing more than the basics, yet encompassing everything. It was the culmination of an ever-escalating tower of fundamentals, built higher and higher until it seemed to touch the heavens. Samit's kick echoed that same perfection. It was the very technique that NAK Mui relied on most during their bouts. Unlike the flashy knees and elbows commonly associated with Muay Thai, this was the quintessence of the basics. In essence, his kick was the perfect refinement of fundamental technique. "Amazing," said Kirishima.
"I'm truly astonished."
"That was a beautiful kick. Back in the day, I executed it as naturally as breathing. These days, though, old age makes it tougher, and the power has dropped considerably. TSK." Samit chuckled at Kirishima's praise, feigning complaint. Kirishima clenched his fists as he watched him. This was the first true master Kirishima had encountered since arriving in this world. He had been prepared to meet nothing but pretenders on his journey, and yet here he was, meeting someone extraordinary. He truly felt fortunate. Once again, Kirishima thought that taking such a devoted trip during the crucial summer break of his 3rd year of middle school had been entirely worth it. Observing the exhilarated Kirishima, Samit straightened his creaking frame. His body, no longer as young as it once was, now grew fatigued with even the slightest movement. Yet he had deliberately demonstrated that kick as a token of thanks for the technique the young man had shown him. On another level, it was his way of asserting that he was still alive and worthy of respect. Fortunately, even after a long hiatus, the technique he had honed throughout his life landed flawlessly. Relieved that he hadn't lost face, Samet began contemplating how he would now teach Kirishima. It was the moment when the legacy of an old man, whose era had passed, intersected with the dawn of a new one embodied by a young man. After their unforgettable first encounter, the two plunged into grueling training with unyielding intensity. The schedule was brutal. Training began before meals and lasted over 8 hours. In his previous life, even top professionals would train their bodies for only 3 to 6 hours at most. This was an entirely different level of hard work. Even 3 days into their regimen, they continued to exchange lessons with burning passion. Your lead foot keeps turning inward. I know it's hard to break habits once they're ingrained, but you must try harder. If your lead foot rotates inward, it compromises your defense against your opponent's kicks, and it hinders your own kicks too. Boxing even demands a stance with feet aligned straight. Get accustomed to it quickly. Yes, sir. Kirishima complied with Samet's instruction, adjusting his lead foot so that it pointed firmly forward. While boxing stances, especially when crouched, often feature a forward-pointing lead foot, Kirishima typically favored a more upright stance. In truth, the square stance of Muay Thai and the crouching stance of boxing were so different that their techniques didn't entirely overlap. You've got your quirk on your side, so maintaining your natural posture is acceptable. With your superhuman physical abilities, prioritizing mobility makes sense. Besides, the martial art you'll eventually rely on isn't Muay Thai, which you're only studying for a few days with me, but boxing. You need to absorb what works and forge your own style. That's true. I'm teaching you orthodox Muay Thai so you won't be caught off guard by kickers. I know your talent is extraordinary, but you still lack practical experience. That's true. I've barely had any real combat experience. I fought a few times, but nothing worth bragging about. While blocking a bamboo sword that whistled in from all directions, Kirishima replied. In his previous life, even counting his amateur bouts, he'd participated in over 100 matches, all fought under boxing rules. Strictly speaking, Kirishima had little experience in no-holds-barred combat. A handful of skirmishes in his childhood back then, and twice in this life against villains, that was the extent of it. Even so, while the brutal streets of his former life followed a harsh, unspoken code, it was still a far cry from pure chaos. In modern Japan, having clashed with villains twice at the age of 15 was nothing short of extraordinary. Samet's standards and Kirishima's were unreasonably high. I heard your story, and I'm relieved you haven't let it get to your head over something trivial. Had you done so, I would have given you a proper thrashing. Haha, I've only fought opponents weaker than me. If I'm going to boast, I should at least defeat someone on my level first. Samet smiled in satisfaction at Kirishima's reply. This boy was so combative it was hard to believe he had been raised in peaceful Japan. Although aggressive individuals were not uncommon, few were willing to throw their whole body into battle without hesitation. In a tranquil society like Japan's, where violence was rare and life was cherished, the idea of plunging into combat was almost alien. But this boy was different. It was evident from his candid recounting and the energy he displayed during training. He had been born a fierce predator and an insatiable conqueror. Good. Now don't just block counterattack too. No punches. Use only kicks. Yes. In Samet's eyes, if this boy hadn't been raised with love by ordinary parents, he might have grown up to be a villain. Yet Samet admired that raw, combative spark in Kirishima. Though the passage of time had faded many things, the fundamentals of martial arts remained the art of obliterating one's opponent. Protecting oneself and annihilating the enemy had always been the supreme objective. Techniques that overly focused on restraining an opponent's injuries were, in the realm of martial arts, a true anomaly. In that regard, Kirishima's capacity to switch to an aggressive stance without losing his cool was ideal. At the very least, he was the kind of fighter who wouldn't hesitate at a critical moment and jeopardize everything. Dodging Kirishima's clumsy kicks while skillfully wielding the bamboo sword, Samit chuckled softly. Initially, he hadn't planned on taking the boy under his wing at all, yet now he found himself almost treating him like a disciple. Age really does weaken you, he mused. I can't help it. Just then, the timer rang. That's enough for today. You've improved a lot. Starting tomorrow, we'll begin work on clinch techniques. Honestly, I'm not sure how much you'll absorb, but it's better to learn it all the same. Yes, I can't stay long anyway, so the training has to be intensive. Big brother. As they spoke, the door swung open, and a little boy dashed in, calling out to Kirishima. The child, his bright yellow hair fluttering as he ran, leaped into Kirishima's arms without hesitation. Sliding his hands under the boy's arms, Kirishima lifted him and said, Tetsuya, you always come running the moment training ends. And remember, you need to greet your grandfather before you greet me. He might feel left out. Ah, right. I'm home, Grandpa. Ahem. Yes, yes. Big brother, you promised you'd go out with me today. Hurry up. Come on, hurry. As Samit acknowledged the child's half-bowed greeting with a cough, Tetsuya's attention immediately returned to Kirishima. Though Kirishima had grown accustomed to the challenges of children since his reincarnation, he still found them perplexing. All right, I'll shower first and then we're off. So wait a bit. Okay. Tetsuya nodded frantically, his eyes shining with excitement. With a resigned smile, Kirishima patted the boy's head and headed straight for the shower room. During the 3 days he stayed at Samit's house, he also grew acquainted with the family. Among them, Samit's grandson Tetsuya had taken an immediate liking to Kirishima. The boy, who dreamed of becoming a support item developer, had eagerly tried to have Kirishima test all sorts of gadgets he had created. Many of the items were crude, befitting a 7-year-old, but Kirishima found them impressive for his age. Their design intent was clear, and they functioned with a decent level of effectiveness. Tetsuya's lack of technical skill meant his creations were somewhat unstable, and in that respect, Kirishima, protected by his hardening, proved to be the perfect subject for testing. Before long, the two became fast friends. 12 minutes, 37 seconds, 38 seconds. Too slow. Big brother. No. I need to wash up properly before we go out. Otherwise, it's rude to others. Why are you in such a rush? What time is the appointment? We're meeting at 4 at Aunt Miho's cafe. Huh? That's still plenty of time, and it wouldn't take long to get there. Still, I want to go as soon as possible. Is that so? Kirishima merely shrugged at the child's illogical chatter. After 10 years of looking after his friends since his reincarnation, he had learned that reasoning with children was futile. For major issues, you must argue until they understand, but otherwise, it's best to simply follow their pace. Quickly dressing, Kirishima scooped up Tetsuya and left the house. Mom, I'm off with Big Brother. Be careful, all right? And be on time. Thank you, Kirishima. I know training with your father must be exhausting, yet you still play with Tetsuya. Haha, I'm having fun too. I'll take good care of him. Please do. See you later. We're off. Outside the mansion, the scorching sunlight greeted Kirishima as he walked with the little boy. Fortunately, the meeting spot Tetsuya mentioned was close by. Hand in hand, Kirishima asked, So, what kind of person is this Hatsum? You said you met her online.
My Nona.
She's not only pretty, but her personality really clicks with mine. I'm going to marry her someday. Marry? How old is she? She's 15. Lucky, right? If she were 18, I'd be kind of disappointed. My ideal is someone within 10 years of my age. 8 years apart might seem like a lot, but more importantly, if a girl your age likes you back, that would be a crime in itself. Kirishima was taken aback by Tetsuya's bold declaration of marriage, but he knew that childhood infatuations were fleeting. Taking it in stride, he hoisted Tetsuya onto his broad shoulders and asked, "Lucky? Huh? By the way, if she's 15, is she in high school?"
No.
"She's in her 3rd year of middle school." "Same as you, big brother." Is that so?" "Yeah. She said that during summer vacation she has so much free time. It's great because she can make lots of babies. Babies? I mean her inventions. She calls her inventions babies." "Ah, I had no idea what you meant. So, how did you meet her?" There's a community for aspiring support item developers. Amateurs post photos and videos of their work, and people provide feedback. Keep posting mine too. I guess the Infinity Gauntlet really caught her eye. Kirishima recalled the most memorable creation among the boys' gadgets. It wasn't its performance that impressed him, but its name. The item shared its name with a gadget used by the main villain in a blockbuster film from his previous life, making it instantly unforgettable. There were no infinity gems in this world, but the device functioned similarly to a projectile system. An hexagonal bar, essentially a bullet, launched from the back of the hand into the knuckle when a punch was thrown. Depending on its color, the bar could deliver electric shock, trigger explosions, ignite flames, or even freeze its target. Of course, even if Tetsuya's parents were supportive of his dreams, they wouldn't have allowed him to build something so dangerous from the outset. So he had to secretly reduce its firepower to a mere 10th while retaining most functions. And once discovered, he wasn't permitted to test it himself. It was a good thing the project hadn't been scrapped. Originally destined to rot in a storage room, it had been rescued by Kirishima, who got to try it out. Though it meant little to him, Kirishima was not the type who needed a weapon to supplement his own formidable power. "Really? Didn't you say you uploaded that at the start of the year?" "Yeah. I posted it as a New Year's celebration the moment January 1st arrived." So you two have known each other for 8 months now. Has it really been that long?" At first, we just exchanged comments on the post. Surprisingly normal communication. Then we switched to email, but waiting for replies was too frustrating for both of us, so we started using a PC calling program. Later, we exchanged phone numbers and even had video calls. And now you're finally meeting in person. "That's right. We're going to meet frequently from now on." "We're almost there. Put me down, big brother. I can't let her see me acting like a little kid." "No, you'll look like a kid anyway." "No, I won't. It's fine as long as I'm not riding on your shoulders. A normal girl would probably see you as a little kid regardless." As they strolled and chatted, the cafe where they were to meet soon came into view. From afar, Tetsuya called, asking Kirishima to put him down. It was amusing watching the little one try so hard to seem grown up, yet Kirishima obediently set him down. That behavior made him look his age, and it was endearingly cute. Come to think of it, all his friends were, in one way or another, far from ordinary. There was Mina, incredibly sociable, Midoriya, excessively kind, and even Bakugo, as fierce as a wild beast. At least Ojiro, whom he met on this trip, was relatively normal. "Ojiro, next time I see you, I'll show you some kindness. Let's get along." Thinking again about how impressive his tailed friend was, Kirishima led an excited Tetsuya into the cafe. A kindly middle-aged woman greeted Tetsuya as he entered. "Hello, Aunt Miho." "Oh my, hello Tetsuya. Is old man Sri Muang doing well? I see your parents sometimes, but I hardly ever see him. Grandpa is in perfect health. Lately, he's been teaching my big brother." "Huh? Big brother? Hello.
I'm Kirishima Eiro.
I've been learning all sorts of things from old man Sri Muang." "Oh my, really? I never thought he would take on a student. He must really like you. Pardon. Oh dear. What am I saying? How silly of me. Just pretend you didn't hear that. Oh, understood. Kirishima was puzzled by her remark, but let it go. Samet had mentioned that he never intended to teach anyone, so Kirishima assumed her comment was related to that. It was odd that an outsider seemed to know his thoughts, but it wasn't the time to press the issue, nor was it important enough to pursue further. After all, regardless of past events or opinions, Kirishima was now learning from Samet. Auntie, hasn't the girl with pink hair arrived yet? Oh, in fact, a young girl with pink hair arrived about 5 minutes ago. She's over there. She pointed toward one corner of the shop. There, a girl with soft, flowing pink hair sat, tapping away at a tablet with a stylus. Oh, there she is. May Nuna. The girl didn't seem to notice and continued focused on her tablet while occasionally taking bites of chocolate cake. Tetsuya tugged Kirishima over to her and shouted again, May Nuna! Huh? And who might you be? Wah! It's me, Tetsuya. Who was that again? You gave me advice about the Infinity Gauntlet, remember? Ah, the Infinity Gauntlet kid. Didn't I tell you we even had video calls? Kirishima was dumbfounded by Hatsum Mei's complete failure to recognize Tetsuya. But Tetsuya, undeterred, cheerfully declared, Yeah, today you said you'd meet me in person and explain everything. I did. Sorry I didn't recognize you. You looked a lot chubbier on our video calls, and honestly, I'm not very interested in people. Now that you've recognized me, it's fine. Watching Tetsuya's endless cheer, Kirishima let out a sigh. It seemed that Hatsum Mei had absolutely no interest in Tetsuya. Of course, if a girl his own age were into a 7-year-old, that would be a problem, but this was typical child behavior. Soon enough, the two drifted into their own world, speaking in terms only they understood, and Kirishima sensed that today was going to be a long one. Indeed, being the guardian of a child, especially one fixated on a field you knew nothing about, can be exhausting. Wondering why, ever since his reincarnation, he seemed to get entangled with kids so often, Kirishima finally sat down. The battle with an alien language had begun. Engineering jargon floated above the table. Kirishima struggled to keep his wits about him amid the hectic flow as he sipped his coffee. So you're saying we might run out of bullets? Exactly. What if we construct it as an integrated vambrace covering the entire arm, attach the magazine to the forearm, and continuously feed rounds through a firing mechanism on the back of the hand? But if you use it that much, will the muzzle even hold up? With repeated explosions and freezing damage, it sounds like a harsh environment. Don't dismiss it before we've even tried. If the muzzle's durability is the issue, we just need to find a material that can handle it. We're not materials engineers ourselves, so making it from scratch would be challenging. That does make sense. Not just makes sense, it's the right idea. When you're creating baby, you can't be shackled by old prejudices. Be free. Experiment boldly. Sure, it might be a bit dangerous, but if you let fear hold you back, you're no pro, Kirishima mused. That all sounds convincing, but isn't it exactly the sort of remark a mad scientist would make? In his experience, the risks weren't limited to the developer alone. As a test user, he'd discovered that many of the devices he'd experimented with could have seriously injured him if he hadn't been the one donning them. There were things that exploded, caught fire, constricted too much, or even warped entirely. Watching Tetsuya nod in agreement with Hatsum's enthusiastic suggestions, Kirishima couldn't help but wonder if this was really the right way to push innovation. It felt as if he were caught in the middle of a mad scientist grooming the next generation of mad scientists. Big bro, what about you? You actually tried it out yourself, right? Even if the firepower was dialed down considerably. Huh? Even if you ask me, it doesn't really matter. I don't need a huge boost in attack power. Right now, I could probably finish most villains with a single blow. And even if that weren't the case, a strike enhanced by a gauntlet isn't exactly irresistible either. Oh, that's interesting. What kind of quirk do you have? Kirishima's quirk is hardening. It makes my body tougher and my strength increases. It's as simple as that. At Tetsuya's innocent evaluation, Kirishima managed a rueful smile. He knew his quirk was solid and suited him perfectly, even if others considered it plain and straightforward. Wow, that's awesome. So we can experiment without worry, right? Let's be friends. No, you can't just be so forward the first time we meet. Kirishima was taken aback as Hatsum brazenly discussed experiments and exchanged contact information. If she was destined to become a top-notch support item designer, forging acquaintances wouldn't be a bad idea. But something about getting too close felt exhausting to him. Tetsuya, oblivious to Kirishima's inner reservations, was excited that those he liked were making an effort to bond. Wow, big bro, you really should get close with her. She's renowned in my community for her talent, and besides, she hardly ever shows interest in anyone else. And you're okay with that? After all the talk about marriage on the way over, Tetsuya's nonchalant suggestion to just be friends struck Kirishima as rather absurd. Normally, wouldn't a guy be a little jealous? Maybe he was overconfident enough to believe that someone like himself wouldn't be interfered with, but this kid was certainly eccentric in his own way. Of course, Kirishima wasn't one to dislike confident talent. It was even better if they had a strong sense of conviction, though this was a somewhat different matter altogether. Ugh, let's take it slow and get to know each other, he conceded. Great, then let's start with introductions. I'm Hatsum Mei, 15 years old, in my 3rd year of middle school. I love support item development and chocolate, and I live here in Kyoto. Hatsum's roundabout self-introduction left Kirishima with a pounding headache. Normal conversation seemed impossible with her. It felt like talking to a child. Perhaps that was why she got along so well with Tetsuya. Not just because their interests aligned. What kind of conversation flow is this? Sigh. I'm Kirishima Ijiro, 14, and in my 3rd year of middle school. Nice. So we're friends now, right? Just call me Mei, and I'll call you by your first name too. Yeah, sure. Fine, I'll call you Mei. That's the spirit, Ijiro. Now, back to the main point, what kind of item do you think you need? Have you given any thought to your costume? Well, I've considered it a bit. Wow, I'm curious too. Still struggling to keep pace with their rapid-fire conversation, Kirishima suddenly broke into a cold sweat as he recalled the costume idea that had been on his mind for so long. In hindsight, a costume didn't offer much practical benefit for someone like him. Hardening provided ample defense, and his offense was no different. All that remained was a concept to help him stand out, but nothing convincing came to mind. Given his fighting style, any costume top would likely get damaged quickly, so he planned on going without one entirely. Since he couldn't just walk around in his underwear, he intended to settle for fairly long pants. When he revealed his tentative plan, both Mei and Tetsuya were taken aback and promptly chided him. That's absurd. A costume is a hero symbol. Without a top, it's nothing more than everyday clothes. I mean, having at least a minimal concept wouldn't hurt, but I just couldn't come up with one. You must have also thought of a hero name, right? Surely you have something planned. Huh? I've already decided. I'm going with champion. It signifies being the best, and it also implies a warrior who fights on behalf of others, like a spokesman for those who can't fight for themselves. In truth, it was a name he'd settled on while reflecting on his past life. After reincarnating, he'd realized that the ideas of a warrior and a spokeswoman could both be embodied in a single word. Oh, the way you put it makes it sound really cool. Big bro. Does it? Good. All right, the meaning is set. So now we need to decide what kind of baby suits you. Do I really have to do that? Don't be so obvious. Watching Hatsum insist on practically forcing an item onto him, Kirishima shook his head in exasperation. What was he supposed to do when he didn't really need anything extra? Pants aside, you're not going to strut around in just your underwear, are you? Or do you plan to go completely naked? Don't be gross. I'd lose my license before I even got the chance to be a hero. Exactly. The pants could use a unique flair, but that's a design issue we can skip for now. Jiro, you're saying you don't need any extra combat power, right? Yeah, I'm more than capable on my own in a fight. Then what about communication or reconnaissance equipment? Kirishima felt as if he'd been struck on the head by her suggestion. He'd never thought of himself as foolish, but this time he really had dropped the ball. After all, in the NFL he'd followed in his previous life, the bench and the field, separated by mere dozens of meters, communicated over radios. In a battle where lives were on the line, effective communication was essential. And with the limits of signal range, reconnaissance capability was just as necessary. He couldn't fathom why it hadn't occurred to him sooner, right? Even if Big Bro's hearing is exceptional, there's only so much one can do. On a chaotic battlefield, the speaker has to shout, and even then you might miss parts of it. True, I never thought of that. Looks like Big Bro was a martial arts dummy too. That's not it. Though Kirishima considered himself an ordinary guy in many respects, he firmly rejected Tetsuya's jab. His talent was far from ordinary, and his penchant for battling foes wasn't common. But he didn't see that as a flaw. When it came to martial arts, anyone with clear objectives would naturally push themselves this far. Yet Tetsuya seemed to have a different perspective. Come on. A person who spends their vacation traveling the country to learn martial arts isn't exactly normal. When you put it that way, I can't argue with you. Enough small talk. The important thing is, Jiro, you need baby's help too. I do think I might need some kind of item, but listening to you go on about baby this and baby that makes me want to live without one. That won't do. If you're aiming to be a pro hero, you must strive for reason and efficiency. That's true as well, but alright then. Since you need either communication or reconnaissance gear, what do you think would work best? Atsum quickly launched into a discussion with Tetsuya about the ideal design for the equipment. What began as a simple bone conduction headset had somehow morphed into the idea of a crown. So how about a thorn crown? I am your savior. Isn't that cool? Why a crown, though? Because you're a champion. What's fit for the best should obviously be a crown. What does being the best have to do with a crown? Why not make a proper laurel instead? Big Bro, a laurel would be way too uncomfortable. A crown is just right in many ways. Usually, Kirishima was in control of any conversation, but these two were formidable opponents. Immersed in their own world, they twisted his words into their own logic every time, leaving him no room to win the argument. They weren't bad people by any means, but talking with them was exhaustingly surreal. At that moment, an alarm rang out to recall Kirishima. It was the signal he'd set to ensure he got Tetsuya home in time for dinner. Grateful to his past self for setting aside enough time, Kirishima announced, It's already time to go. Let's pick this up another time. We have dinner to catch. If your place is far, should I see you home? I purposely scheduled plenty of time. Our place isn't far either. A 10-minute walk will do. And next time, I'm definitely making a crown for you. Jiro. So you have to try it on. Okay. Ugh, that crown again. Fine. If you make it, I'll at least give it a try. Now let's go. We're not staying here, right? Yep. As much as I'd love to keep chatting, we've got to get back and create more baby. See you tomorrow, Big Bro? I've got plenty of time.
No.
That's all our free time for this week. From tomorrow, I've got to get back to making more babies. But we'll meet again, won't we? You're a talented prospect, so maybe, and you'll see me again partly because of that crown anyway. I'm starting to get scared. Could you seriously stop with the crown talk? After finally corralling Hatsum and Tetsuya, still animatedly discussing the crown, out of the cafe, Kirishima bid them farewell. It was nice meeting you both. Let's catch up again if the chance arises, though who knows when that might be. You already swapped phone numbers and now are talking as if we might bump into each other by chance? I'll get in touch when the crown is ready, so don't run off. Sigh. Alright, let's go. Take care. Goodbye, big bro. See you again. Finally freed from their world, Kirishima left the cafe with Tetsuya. Listening to the excited chatter of the boy as they walked, the mansion soon came into view. Kirishima ushered him inside and said, "Hold on. I think I left something at the cafe." "Huh? What did you leave?" "I must have left my card after paying. I'll be right back." "Man, big bro, you can be surprisingly careless. Alright, hurry back." After Tetsuya went inside, Kirishima's face hardened. Without hesitation, he turned and retraced his steps. After taking one step, then another, Kirishima suddenly sprang forward, almost as if he had kicked off the ground. Leaving only a faint afterimage behind, he headed toward a large man clad in a Hawaiian shirt, mask, and sporting a close-cropped haircut. "Hey, HM? And who might you be?" Uncharacteristically rude, Kirishima barked at him. The man smiled in confusion and asked, "Who are you?" Hearing this, Kirishima was momentarily dumbfounded. Lately, whenever he stepped outside, he naturally broadened his awareness. This was the same man whose presence had been flagged when he left with Tetsuya. At the time, Kirishima had merely thought it odd to see a rare Japanese-style mansion in the middle of the city. But now, as he returned home, the man still stood in the same spot, in the same posture, fixated on the mansion. "Who are you? Is that really all you've got? What kind of guy has been staring at that building for over 2 hours? Are you on watch or something?" At Kirishima's accusation, the man's expression shifted dramatically. The corners of his once smiling eyes lifted, and his 3 white irises gleamed menacingly. In a voice that grated like metal on stone, he replied, "You're a sharp little kid, but that's exactly what I want to know. Kid, who are you? Why are you coming out of there? What's your connection with the old man? Why do you care? Spare me the nonsense and just tell me why you're watching the mansion. You've got guts and your body's in fine shape. Kid, if you keep acting all high and mighty, you'll end up seriously hurt one day. Looks like you learned a thing or two from the old man. Now answer me and scram." Staring into his eyes, Kirishima furrowed his brow. He could sense an aura emanating from someone who had crossed an irreversible line. People who had taken lives exuded a distinctly alien presence. It was like the scent of a predator stalking its prey. Once, that smell was familiar to him. Now it was rare and unsettling. With a cold glare, Kirishima bared his teeth and responded, "Words won't cut it then." Without hesitation, he reached out to seize the man by the collar. Astonishingly, Kirishima's hand met only empty air. The man had already stepped back 2 paces. Though Kirishima hadn't given it his all, the man's evasive move was more than an ordinary reaction. Deep down, Kirishima was convinced that this man was no ordinary person. The man grinned, baring his teeth. "Humph, not bad. But kid, I'm just an ordinary citizen right now. Is it really okay for you to get physical like that? It won't look good, and the old man wouldn't approve. I know exactly how these things work. An ordinary citizen? Nowadays, even ordinary people can hardly dodge an attack from a villain. Ah, strength and weakness aren't what determine if you're a citizen. TCH. Seeing that the man showed no reluctance to let his guard down, Kirishima pulled his fist back for now. The man took a few steps back and said, "Kid, I don't know what your connection to the old man is, but judging by your movements, you must be his disciple, right? Go on. Tell the old man that Takaru has returned. He'll understand. The circumstances and location aren't favorable, so I'll handle you separately later. Until then, learn all you can, disciple. Huh. With that, the man darted away, leaping onto the roof of a nearby house before vanishing in an instant. Kirishima was left baffled by the man's words, but the situation was too precarious to pursue him into another brawl in the middle of the city. They had only just clashed with a villain, and starting another fight now would bring unwelcome attention. If the man had come charging with lethal intent, that would be one thing, but now, taking the initiative could lead to severe social repercussions. Kirishima clicked his tongue and turned back toward the mansion. It had been a dinner with an undeniably bitter aftertaste. Kirishima returned to the mansion, masking the turmoil inside with a cheerful smile as he sat down to dinner with the Sri Muang family. After meeting the pretty older sister who sang every day, Tetsuya was so exhilarated that he vowed to see her again next time. Based on his first-hand impression of Hatsume's personality, it seemed she would only be interested in meeting him if he had some novel invention to show off, something that might just spur Tetsuya into action. Kirishima laughed softly at the boy's remark and proceeded to recount how Tetsuya had behaved in front of Hatsume. The family burst into laughter as they listened to tales of his nearly unintelligible ramblings and the eccentric antics that had left both of them in a fix. Even Samit couldn't quite hide the subtle smile tugging at the corners of his lips beneath his stern gaze. After the pleasant dinner had ended, Kirishima stayed with Tetsuya as he tinkered with his gauntlet. Once the boy had dozed off, Kirishima quietly made his way to Samit's room. Behind the silently open door, he could see Samit gently tapping away at a tablet, absorbed in writing. "Oh, Ajiro, was it? Thanks for keeping Tetsuya company," Samit said. "Not at all. He's a sweet, well-behaved kid." "It wasn't any trouble," replied Ajiro warmly. Samit chuckled softly at Kirishima's modest explanation. "I know how hard it can be to keep kids entertained. Raising my first and second sons taught me that well enough. Especially with the first one. I had no clue what I was doing, so it was a real struggle." "Wow. Hard to imagine that when I look at you now," Kirishima teased. Samit laughed heartily as he stroked his white beard. "So what brings you here? You're usually busy with your own business at night." "Well, sir, do you happen to know someone named Takaru?" At this question, Samit's expression suddenly darkened. He fixed Kirishima with a steely, cold gaze. After a long moment of silence, he spoke in a heavy tone. "How do you know that name? I took Tetsuya out, and there was a man who just stood by our house the entire time, from when we left until we returned. Something about him struck me as off, so I approached and asked about it. And at first he tried to hide who he was. I was about to grab him by the collar, but he slipped away quite easily despite putting up a fight. Then he asked if I was your student, told me his name, and said to inform you that he had returned. He even mentioned he'd see you again soon, calling himself your disciple." Samit ran a hand through his hair before stroking his beard thoughtfully. The deep lines on his weathered skin revealed the burden of his thoughts. After a low, thoughtful murmur, he tapped the table twice as if sealing his decision. Since you've already met him, I should explain. He's my disciple, a foolish, headstrong kid. Not a bad guy, mind you, but..." He trailed off, locking eyes with Kirishima. "Come to think of it, he reminds me a lot of you." "I wouldn't call myself foolish or stubborn," Kirishima replied lightly. "Not that exactly, you little brat. I mean, he's hot-headed and loves a good fight," Samit said with a teasing smirk. "I guess I do have a bit of that in me. See? You don't even deny it. And when things go sideways, he won't think twice about using any means necessary." "Really? Have I ever shown that side in front of you? I mean, I try to behave well when you're around." Samit let out a soft laugh at Kirishima's surprised retort. Despite his youth, the boy possessed a maturity beyond his years. But he still had much to learn. That's the wisdom of an old man. Honestly, One doesn't have to be exceptionally wise to see through you. Is that so? Yes, you aren't the type to go around boasting about yourself. To be frank, when I become a hero, I'm sure I won't need to brag. Other people will hunt me down, piece together my story, and spread it for all to see before I even say a word. Kirishima shook his head as if acknowledging a hard-earned truth, and Samit could only chuckle at the boy's mature premonition. Sometimes the boy spoke as if he had already lived a full lifetime, even though in truth it was a past experience Kirishima had endured long ago, a fact of which Samit was blissfully unaware. Still, the two of you are quite different. You don't really get caught up in the idea of dispensing justice, do you? No, I guess my stance is more about doing what I can, Kirishima replied. Takaru, on the other hand, was entirely different. He had that same obsession you have with martial arts, but he applied it to his sense of justice. You and I might treat martial arts merely as a means to personal ends, but he saw them as a tool for the greater good. From the way you describe him, he sounds like a decent guy. I did say he wasn't a bad man, but in society's eyes, he wasn't exactly a paragon either. He acted entirely on his own terms. Samit sighed heavily, his face etched with bitterness. Just the thought of Takaru made his chest feel heavy. After all, Takaru was the only disciple he'd ever taken on since beginning Muay Thai. His one and only, in all his 66 years. Whenever he thought of what had become of the boy, a deep sadness welled within him. Deciding it was time to warn Kirishima, Samit continued, I'm telling you this so you can learn from his mistakes. You might get carried away when you're fired up, and no one can predict what you might do. From everything he'd observed, the boy was calm and good-natured in everyday life. Yet beneath that polite exterior lay a boundary, a line in his heart that, if crossed, would compel him to mete out immediate, brutal punishment. And that punishment? It was as ruthless and savage as it was swift. It's been 30 years since I first met that foolish disciple. I remember it was a scorching summer, unbearably hot. Oh, he looked about 40. So does that mean you met him as a teenager? Yes, he was only 11. I arrived in Kyoto at 26, and after 20 years of relentless fighting, I had managed to claim one street as a safe zone. Naturally, a few like-minded souls began to gather around me, forming a kind of faction. They tried to prop me up as their leader, but that was never my style. Kirishima nodded in understanding. He was the sort who was never cut out for the politics of an organization. If anyone tried to make him the head of a group, he'd either flee immediately or tear the whole thing apart with his own two hands. That day, after I told those fools to stop their nonsense and disband their makeshift organization, I was on my way home when a ragged little kid blocked my path. He shouted, asking if I was really the toughest guy on the street. Haha, that kid had some nerve. Yes, bold indeed. I tried to shrug it off, saying I didn't know if I was the strongest and attempted to pass by. But the kid clutched my pant leg, insisting that I help him become stronger. Honestly, I was so taken aback I almost ignored him. No doubt that must have annoyed you, sir. It really did. He ended up following me all the way to my house and hollering outside the gate like a madman. But he befriended my eldest son so well that I ended up taking him in without much fuss. And just like that, he quietly became my disciple. Haha, you really got completely talked into it, sir. Though his words were rough, the nostalgia in Samit's eyes softened as he recalled those days. In a life filled with twists and turns, that had been the moment when things started looking up. The kid had great potential, strong character, unyielding drive, and plenty of talent. If you're praising him like that, he must have been exceptional. Truly, he was a genius. Although, looking at you now, I'd say he was more of a prodigy than a genius. Haha. The problem was, his parents had been killed by villains, leaving him with a burning hatred. A very fierce one. But isn't harboring hatred toward villains a natural response? I believe in revenge. I don't see anything wrong with repaying blood with blood. But the danger was that he merged that hatred with his own sense of justice. He was righteous in his own way, yet he let that blend of emotions justify everything he did. That does sound unsettling, though I suppose it can happen. It can if you're just an ordinary person trying to stay away from violence. But he wanted to be a hero, and he became one. I'm repeating myself, but a hero must never let hatred for villains take root. And if it does, it must be kept concealed at all costs. A hero's duty is to enforce justice, not pursue personal vendettas. Kirishima nodded solemnly as Samit's serious gaze met his. It was a question he had pondered time and again since arriving in this world. The heroes of his past life in those over-the-top, almost mythical tales were entirely different from the heroes of this world. Here, being a hero was a legitimate profession with clearly defined social responsibilities. They were not permitted to overstep their bounds, and even when violence was unavoidable, it had to be both justifiable and acceptable to the public. After all, a hero as a public figure could not exist without the support of the people. That was why heroes were expected to act and appear to be fair and proper. That kid was lacking in that regard. At first, people adored him because he was strong and would take on villains without hesitation. But he got carried away and began crossing the line. In the end, he killed a villain in the midst of an arrest. I see. In that moment, Kirishima's mind flashed back to the gleam in Takaru's eyes. It wasn't that Takaru had lived a charmed life, but there was something distinctly harsh and unsettling in that look. Just the sight of it made Kirishima feel a burning irritation, as if he wanted nothing more than to knock the arrogance right out of him. People who believed themselves born to rule could hardly tolerate such defiance. If things had ended there, it might have been better. After that, he killed a few more villains, the punishments and suspensions grew more severe. Yet, there were still those who admired his extreme methods, who found satisfaction in his brutality, and somehow he managed to persist as a hero. Barely. When I heard what happened, I went to confront him, determined to knock some sense into that hot temper of his. But then, something went wrong. What happened? The fool killed a villain in broad daylight, right in front of everyone. And not just any villain, but one who was on his knees, pleading for mercy. The guy hadn't even put up any real resistance, yet Takaru repeatedly pummeled his face. The villain had a quirk and monstrous physical strength, so you can imagine the scene. His face was utterly mangled. Everyone witnessed it live. That just doesn't seem right. It wasn't. In the end, Takaru was stripped of his hero license. I later learned that the villain had abducted and sexually abused children. My foolish disciple had witnessed it firsthand, and that drove him over the edge. If I saw that, I'm sure I'd lose it too. He's the kind of scumbag you'd want to tear apart on the spot. Kirishima could empathize with Takaru, at least deep down. For someone like Kirishima, still partly clinging to remnants of his American identity. A child abuser was a monster so vile that even tearing him limb from limb would hardly seem enough. That might sound righteous, but those who saw it all didn't know the full story. Public opinion turned Takaru into nothing more than a murderer without any heroic dignity. My foolish disciple tried to explain what had happened, but the truth, something no one wanted to face, was completely brushed aside. From what I later heard, a tiny correction only appeared after he'd already lost his hero status. And by then, no one cared anymore. That man's life has been full of pitfalls, hasn't it? If that had been the end of it, maybe things would have been all right. But the idiot got drunk, got into a brawl with a passerby, and ended up seriously injuring him. I don't know what was said, but a man who once stood as a hero ended up striking a civilian. There was no way that could end well. In the end, he landed in prison 5 years ago. And now that bastard is out. Samit sighed wearily, his exhaustion evident. For him, watching the life of his only disciple unravel so completely was a burden too heavy to bear. So take care of yourself too. Don't let your anger drive you to kill indiscriminately. Always assess the situation calmly. I don't plan on killing villains in public, at least. If worst comes to worst and I must take a life, I won't kill someone who's already been subdued. We'll see about that. TCH. I'll handle the fool myself. You focus on learning. Huh? I don't even know his address or contact details. How do you plan on finding him? I've lived in these parts for 50 years. If he's anywhere nearby, trust that I have my ways. Now stop worrying about that and concentrate on your martial arts. You have less than 10 days left here. That's true. Then I'll leave it in your hands, sir. Seeing Kirishima bow his head, Samit chuckled softly. After all, he wasn't exactly his disciple. Samit wasn't the kind of man who, after barely 2 weeks of teaching, would call someone his disciple. And fundamentally, Kirishima's approach was always his own. Still, with that devilishly blessed talent and his easy smile, Samit was certain that Muay Thai would become a cornerstone in Kirishima's life as a hero. Hoping the boy would avoid the pitfalls that had doomed his own disciple, Samit bid him farewell. Having had all his questions answered, Kirishima returned to his room without hesitation. The night of their meeting was drawing to a close. After that, Kirishima completely forgot about Takaru, devoting himself to learning Muay Thai at an astonishing pace. His kicks, once a bit clumsy, now traced clean, precise arcs through the air. He had even grown adept at the close-range clinch fighting that had nothing in common with boxing. The elbows and knees he employed from that stance were devastating, especially coming from a man of Kirishima's stature. In just over 10 days, he had laid down a solid foundation, prompting Samit to click his tongue in approval. TCH, you really are a fast learner. If I keep you here any longer, I'll run out of new tricks. Come on, sir. That's not like you. I know I'm still far from perfect, but at least I can say I've mastered Muay Thai when my punches come through. By your standards, there are probably fewer than 10 people in the world who can claim to have truly learned Muay Thai. Heh. Just then, as the two of them chatted amiably, the door swung open and a familiar voice rang out. Big bro, I'm here. And there's a new uncle too. Long time no see, old man. And it hasn't been that long since I last saw you, disciple. Came the reply. The rough, gravelly timbre prompted Kirishima to instantly shift into a fighting stance. His skin seemed to harden as his senses sharpened, and a protective field spread out around him capable of deflecting any attack. When Takaru saw Kirishima glaring at him with cold eyes, the man from 10 days ago raised his hands in a placating gesture. Hey now, don't get all worked up. I didn't come here to fight. Besides, even though I call him old man, he's still my master. Do you really think I dare to hurt him? His flamboyant floral shirt fluttered with the gesture as he spoke. Kirishima listened carefully, gradually lowering his guard. He maintained his defensive stance and the hardening effect, but at least he no longer displayed outright hostility. Takaru grinned broadly and said, "That's right. Good boy." Only then did Kirishima realize exactly why he found the man so infuriating. The man was his kind, someone who believed without a moment's doubt that he would be the best. And because he looked down on Kirishima from that pedestal of self-assurance, dealing with him was anything but pleasant. It was the sort of person who made you want to knock the arrogance right out of him. Kirishima offered a crooked smile as he met Takaru's gaze. It was a sour reunion, like an unripe wine, not yet at its full maturity. Samit did not panic. He stroked his white, aged beard and barked, "Your mouth is as rude as ever, you foolish disciple. So, have you finally given up skulking around like some pathetic stalker?" Takaru grinned and ruffled his coarse, unruly hair. "I've been cooped up in prison for so long that I forgot Kyoto lies right at your feet, old man." Then, When some puny guy came over claiming to convey your orders, I figured I'd been tiptoeing around for nothing. So today, I decided to barge in without hesitation. Heh, I figured all those years behind bars would have burned out your fire. Why didn't you show up sooner? You were released a month ago. Were you off to check on some hidden woman? A woman? Who would be interested in a guy like me? Even if I'd earned some money by honestly doing hero work, which I haven't, it's laughable to claim I've lost my nerve. No, the one who's truly lost his nerve is you, old man. You brat. I'm only saying that because I have nothing left but these final days. Amid their oddly affectionate banter, a palpable tension filled the space between the two men. It was like watching an aged, once mighty lion face off against a comrade who had briefly strayed from the pride only to return. Kirishima observed them in quiet silence. Takaru wasn't exactly someone he liked, yet he wasn't so petty as to interrupt a long-awaited reunion between master and disciple. Days until you die, huh? But you still look spry to me. In my estimation, old man, you'll likely live to be 100. And as for why you came late, I had a place I wanted to visit as soon as I got out of that damn prison. Huh? You have somewhere else you'd rather go besides here? Remember those kids who were abused by the bastard I killed? When I learned in prison where they were living, I resolved that the very first thing I'd do after my release was head there. Most of them were orphans, gathered together in a single facility. Ha! Now that I think about it, I was so preoccupied with you that I never properly looked after them. Though there wasn't much I could do anyway. Takaru offered a faint smile as he regarded his weathered master. It's all right. There were plenty of people under your wing. You had enough to worry about without tending to every last soul. Besides, what could a mere civilian do? In a situation like that, when public opinion was already rotten, if you had intervened, they would have dragged you into the fray. In such cases, it's only right for the government to step in. So, are the kids doing well? Well, it's hard to say. Considering everything they've been through, they seem to be holding up all right. Being in a national facility meant there was at least an effort to care for them, even if many needs still went unmet. That can't be helped. So, did seeing them make you happy? Samit's inquiry, Takaru's expression flickered. The smile that had greeted his arrival vanished, replaced by a look mingling anger and the verge of tears. He allowed his tangled emotions to surface for a moment, then closed his eyes and, when he opened them again, spoke in a subdued tone. Happy? I'm not so sure. Honestly, when I first entered prison, I was furious. I didn't understand what I'd done so terribly wrong, and I resented those who glowered at me for killing a man who deserved his fate. Frankly, I'm not much different now. If I could go back, I'd kill him again. I know your damned stubborn streak well enough not to need an explanation. You're the kind of man who sticks to his convictions until the bitter end. That's partly why I admired you. I just never imagined that would lead to your downfall. Downfall, huh? Well, that's not entirely off the mark. But the funny thing is, those kids never saw me as a fallen loser. To them, I was, and apparently still am, the only hero in the world. Truth be told, I almost shed tears like a fool, realizing that in the end, I did save them. That's the reward for saving people. Sure, you were a bit too extreme, but what now? What's your plan? I'm not set on anything yet, but if I had to choose a direction, I'm thinking of heading overseas. Samit frowned at Takaru's words. What was this fool, who can barely string a foreign phrase together, talking about going overseas? You can't even utter a word in another language. Are you really that desperate to escape? Takaru snorted at Samit's remark and then opened his mouth. I'd never casually decide to go abroad. I studied hard in prison. Ha, fair enough. That's impressive, but it's still awfully vague. What do you plan to do for a living? What else? I'll earn my keep doing what I do best. Have you lost your mind? Are you planning to become a mercenary? Mercenary? That sounds too crude. Let's say I'll work for a private security company. Changing the label doesn't change the rotten core of it. I'm not going to make a living by taking lives. Honestly, I still believe that those who deserve to die should, and if I encounter such a person, I'll kill them. If push comes to shove, I'll head to a place where villains are scarce. In such a place, my hero career would probably be held in high regard, and I might even serve as a hero. Not wrong, I suppose. The point is, I'm heading overseas to earn money so I can help the kids I saved do what they want. Frankly, besides you and those kids, I can't stand most people in this country. I'm not as magnanimous as you, old man. Don't sugarcoat it in front of the kid. You know full well I'm no paragon. You're still the greatest man I've ever met. Honestly, someone like All Might seems less like a great man and more like a lunatic, so don't go saying that anywhere else you'll get stoned. Do you think I'm a child? I know better than that. Then why the hell did you end up in prison for acting like one? Ah, old man, you just keep prodding the sore spots. Takaru scratched his head in exasperation at Samet's jibe. Then, turning to Kirishima, who had been listening quietly, directed his ire at him. So, who's this kid? Did you take on a new disciple? He looked tough and pretty ferocious last time I saw him. You brat, why are you asking about him when he's right here? But if I must explain, he's not my disciple. He's simply too gifted to be my pupil. Only then did Kirishima, who had been silently listening to their exchange, speak up.
I'm Kirishima Eiro.
I'm training under him on a temporary basis. I can only stick around during vacation. Temporary? Vacation? Were you a student at UA? I'm not in high school. I'm in middle school. Middle school? At that size? Ha! You do look young. Though I assumed you were more mature. I guess I do look a bit young. Takaru regarded Kirishima from head to toe, utterly dumbfounded. So, how long have you been training with the old man? Today marks the 13th day. I thought I said he's not my disciple. This kid made his mark through boxing all on his own. I'm just adding a bit of variety. And now, he's learning so fast I'm starting to wonder if he's going to strip the old man bare. At the mention of 13 days, Takaru furrowed his brow, then whistled low in admiration upon hearing Samet's explanation. Despite time having aged him into a feeble figure, his master still retained the dignity of a fighter, a dignity reminiscent of bygone days when youth reigned supreme. It was during his 3rd year of high school, when he demonstrated his Muay Thai before his master, that he heard those words, "You've built your own territory." Even now, the surge of emotion he had felt then still lived on in his battle-worn heart, defiant against time and the world. He knew better than anyone how rare it was to be fully acknowledged as a martial artist by a master who had once transcended the ordinary. And yet, this kid had earned Samet's recognition at just 15. Then I certainly can't let this pass. Didn't I mention last time that next time we meet, I'll be the one to test you? The old man is too old to spar with you directly, right? I'll see firsthand how well you've learned, disciple.
Hey, brat.
You're not even my disciple. Why are you calling him that? Don't talk nonsense. But why does it look like you're so attached to him? And you're not exactly denying it either. Kirishima made no objection to Takaru's words. To him, if the unshakable first teacher in his life had been the gym owner of his previous existence, then Samet deserved to be regarded as his second master. Samet was a man who excelled both in skill and character. Though he had rejected the title of disciple to avoid imposing on the boy, Kirishima had learned immensely from him, and he expected to continue learning in the future. What better way to describe the bond between a master who teaches selflessly and a student who learns with all his might than as a master-disciple relationship? Honestly, I felt the same. I just never mentioned it because I knew I wasn't the type to fully inherit your Muay Thai. What does that matter? Takaru here is the one who's going to inherit my Muay Thai, so it doesn't matter one bit. I never cared that passing it on was the goal anyway. The real treasure is the bond that forms between people. Then I'll call you master. Oh, so because of you, Takaru, something good came about. I even got to take on a true genius as a disciple. What? Then does that make me a fake genius? You'll find out once you spar. I say this knowing you well. If you let your guard down, you'll lose, so give it your all. Ha! Come on, old man. Even if I rotted in prison for 5 years, you really think I'd lose that easily? Do I sound like I'm just spouting empty words? Samit's even tone caused Takaru to frown. In his prime, he had been a formidable hero. The harmony between his quirk and the martial arts he learned from Samit had always earned him a reputation as a hidden powerhouse in the underground. Though he had often taken down villains and, because of his excessively brutal methods, never garnered much popularity, his combat prowess was widely recognized as exceptional. Well, we'll see once we spar. Disciple, you don't actually like me, do you? I suddenly show up declaring myself your senior and keep ordering you around. If that appeals to you, then you're either a saint or all might. Kirishima said nothing in response. Instead, he smiled at Takaru. After talking with him, it was clear that beneath it all, he was a good man. Though he had certainly crossed lines, he had never done so for personal gain. Yet there was something undeniably grating about his unspoken attitude of, I'm stronger than you. Kirishima wasn't so broad-minded as to ignore that kind of treatment. With eyes burning and a smile tugging at his lips, Kirishima spoke. Not exactly for that reason, but yes, I don't like you. I'd really like to spar with you at least once. Good. That look in your eyes, that answer, it's perfect. A martial artist shouldn't always be too fond of people. Old man, may I spar with him here? You're going to start philosophizing about the spirit of a warrior and then go all out again, aren't you? Of course. Isn't it obvious? Even if it's not against a villain, a spar should be fought with full force. That ridiculous logic of yours hasn't changed one bit. If you're planning on that, forget it, brat. You planning to bring the house down? Ah, then what do we do? Remember that spot we always used when I trained you? Oh, that dump? Still there? I heard they were planning to rebuild it or something. That's just the way the city works. Kirishima, you might not know it well, but just remember, it's a place where you can really go all out. You'll understand the rest once you get there. With that, the two men departed, calling for Kirishima to follow. Kirishima trailed behind them. He climbed into the car Samit was driving and sat quietly, offering curt responses to Takaru's incessant chatter. Just as Takaru's surprisingly voluble rambling was beginning to test his patience, they arrived at their destination. They reached a vast, open lot surrounded by abandoned factories. The once glorious place, once teeming with people, now lay desolate and gray as it welcomed the group. Here, you two can go all out without anyone getting in your way. There's no risk of things collapsing or breaking. I see. It's a good spot. Haha, this is where the old man and I used to train. Back then, I couldn't control my quirk very well. It was dangerous, so we had no choice but to work out in a place like this. With that, Takaru tossed aside his Hawaiian shirt. A well-sculpted body was revealed beneath. Now then, disciple, there's no need for long-winded speeches, right? You want to fight right now, don't you? That's true. Despite all our back and forth, we do understand each other well. Even if I don't like you, Kirishima replied as he also removed his t-shirt. As his body, chiseled with painstaking effort, was unveiled, Takaru whistled appreciatively. Kirishima grinned broadly, baring his teeth at the sight. From everything they'd said so far, it was clear that the man before him was of his own kind. There was no need for Kirishima to hide his true self in front of Samit and Takaru. Kirishima activated his hardening and readied himself for a fight. A fierce, relentless energy surged from within him as his body grew sharper and harder. The beast had opened its eyes. A fierce, sharp surge of energy clashed between them. Unlike Kirishima, whose entire body was encased in hardening, giving him a spiked, menacing appearance, Takaru remained unchanged. Takaru appeared slightly taken aback by the demonic aura radiating off Kirishima, as if a beast were growling in his face. But only for a moment. Then a grin spread across his face as he spoke. Phew, that's impressive. Honestly, any other hero would have been shaking in their boots. Not me, though. After all these years of training, if I were to get scared by a middle school kid, I'd have to kneel and beg my master for mercy. With that remark hanging in the air, Takaru chuckled heartily at his own private joke before reaching into his pants pocket. It was a photograph. He studied it briefly before tucking it away once more. Then the transformation began. His ears surged upward, and the whites of his eyes shimmered into a golden hue. His fangs lengthened, and a mane started to sprout around his neck. Sharp claws extended from his fingertips. A lion? Ha ha ha. Cool, isn't it? This is my quirk. He tilted his head back in laughter at Kirishima's murmured query before responding with an even broader grin. Heh. More precisely, it's the lion man I envision. My quirk, predatory metamorphosis, allows me to reshape my body into the form of the last animal I observed. Although it's called a transformation, it's really more of a mental projection. A trait that initially gave me a hard time, causing me to lose control or blend traits in a chaotic jumble. Were he able to harness the distinct traits of any animal at will, his quirk would be nothing short of extraordinary. Yet, even in a realm teeming with superhumans, the capabilities of wild animals commanded respect. And that didn't even factor in the animal-type mutant heroes. Just consider how overwhelmingly strong Mirko is with her rabbit quirk. Takaru could appropriate the strengths of such mutant heroes at will. You look like you're saying I've got some overpowered cheat quirk, huh? It's not that overpowered. You might think I can just pull any animal trait out of thin air. But it's not that simple. Unlike mutant types, whose natural attributes are always a part of them, letting them effortlessly use those features. Mine appear suddenly, as if a human without a tail suddenly grew one. That said, I can also reshape the abilities of mythical beasts to suit my vision. That sounds overpowered, though. What, can you summon lightning or breathe fire as well? Kirishima asked, dumbfounded. After all, if he could harness mythical beast abilities, wouldn't that include the winds and rains of Eastern dragons or the blazing fire of their Western counterparts? No matter how I imagine lightning, I just can't make it work. But I can breathe fire, at least. That alone is overpowered. According to Takaru, his quirk could, quite literally, do almost anything. It ranged from the myriad abilities of real wild animals to powers that verged on the supernatural, the very feats one would expect from mythical beasts. Of course, as he admitted, suddenly acquiring new body parts demanded extensive training. No one could master every field without limit. Even so, it was clear that his potential was virtually limitless. His quirk held the promise of endless evolution. My quirk's pretty great, isn't it? So what about yours? You look like you've gotten all spiky. Mine is hardening. It makes my body tougher and boosts my physical abilities. Simple, right? Heh, now that's a good one. Simplicity is key. That's precisely why I favor the lion. It's straightforward, powerful, and efficient. He slammed his fists together with a resounding crack. His bared fangs and gleaming eyes brimmed with anticipation for the impending battle. On the other side, Kirishima mirrored that intensity. He looked as if he were a child before a grand feast. But you've been giving off a strange vibe since earlier. Is that some kind of extrasensory perception? Extrasensory perception? What's that supposed to be? It's the ability to use every sense of your body to detect danger from all directions. I'm not sure if everyone has it, but I do. Hence the name. Mine is similar. It's the concept of reacting to any attack that comes within a certain radius. I call it air superiority. Air superiority? Nice name. I wish I'd come up with something like that. It's slightly different, but essentially the same. Instinctively, they both sensed that each was completely aware of the other. At that moment, every breath revealed the subtle movement of each other's throats, lungs, and even the faint tremor of a single hair. Heh. Enough messing around. We don't have all day. I need to be back by evening to eat the meal my daughter-in-law prepares for me. So save the chatter and test your fists. You came here to fight, didn't you? Ha ha ha. Well said, old man. Then let's get to it, kid. I'm not one to waste time by giving the first move. The moment the words fell silent, Takaru shouted and charged. Kirishima reacted instantly to the charge, his expression turning stone cold. It was all in Takaru's stance. His charging posture was not the customary Muay Thai stance, but a resolute boxing crouch. Normally, fighters coming from the Muay Thai camp who dabbled in boxing performed admirably, but to Kirishima, this was nothing short of an insult. Without uttering a word, Kirishima pivoted smoothly aside from Takaru's advance. His rear foot swept in, matching his lead foot in a lightning-quick pivot, and before long, Kirishima had slipped to Takaru's flank. For a fleeting moment, as time slowed under his hyper-alert senses, their eyes locked. Noticing the spark of interest in Takaru's eyes, Kirishima extended his right hand as if reaching through a suspended moment of time. The immense tower of skill he had painstakingly built over 31 years, spanning from his past life to the present, pierced that fleeting instant and crashed into Takaru. A booming impact reverberated, sending shockwaves radiating in every direction. Despite a collision that defied the limits of human endurance, Takaru appeared completely unharmed. The blow had propelled him several feet back, yet he bore no visible injuries. Kirishima noted that the punch had been arrested by his guard, but even so, he eyed Takaru with narrowed eyes at how unscathed he remained. He was tougher than anticipated. Phew, that's stronger than I expected. If I'd let my guard down, that one shot would have taken me out. I can't very well show my disciple such a pitiful defeat when I'm supposed to be the senior. Takaru casually patted his shoulders in a light, joking manner. Yet the light in his eyes had vanished. Behind his rigid expression, a quiet intensity burned fiercely. Fine, I admit it. I underestimated you a bit. Can you blame me? You're 15 and you've only trained under that old man for 13 days. He may have vouched for you, but I haven't seen it for myself. He's no liar, yet there's always a certain decorum expected for your age. But that's not your case. You're already a fine monster. I apologize for underestimating you. From now on, I'll hold nothing back. Do your best to keep up. Slowly, he lifted both hands into a high guard. Maintaining a neutral center of gravity, he widened his stance. Then, his lead leg lifted and shot towards Kirishima's body. His toe struck forward like a lance, slicing through the air with a resounding whoosh before connecting with Kirishima's abdomen. Despite the dramatic motion, the strike landed in eerie silence, prompting Samit to click his tongue in disapproval. He didn't even land a hit. Even after all the training, adapting to an attack of that magnitude in real combat so instantly, Takaru's strike appeared to land perfectly, but in truth, it never made contact. Samit had spent considerable time training Kirishima specifically against kicks, not wanting him to fall prey to them. Muay Thai's diverse attacks ranked a distant second. Kirishima already possessed formidable striking power with punches alone. The priority now was adapting and defending against this new range and trajectory of attack. After all, the primary tenet of martial arts is self-preservation and defeating the enemy. Yet, when these imperatives conflict, self-preservation always takes precedence. Lopping off a limb to save oneself is something reserved for comic books and films. No authentic martial art advocates such drastic measures. It might arise naturally in a life-or-death situation, but not as a taught technique. In that regard, Kirishima was an exceptional martial artist. He executed the most fundamental aspects of martial arts flawlessly. And as he had witnessed time and again, his flawless performance in such a critical moment made his talent seem almost superhuman. Is that all? Give it some more power. All right then, let's have some real fun, disciple. Takaru responded to Kirishima's cool smile with a booming laugh. Mid-level and low kicks flew through the air, leaving behind faint afterimages. He made no distinction between his left and right legs, fluidly switching between southpaw and orthodox stances. As attacks surged from every direction, above, below, and from the sides, Kirishima moved relentlessly. He weaved in and out in wide arcs, evading where he could and blocking where necessary. Whenever he found an opening, he unleashed a rapid barrage of punches. Takaru countered, blocking some strikes with a long guard, parrying others with his shoulders and arms, and evading the rest with deft head movements. The impact of their powerful bodies sent explosions of force through the air, and before the shockwaves could settle, dust and debris erupted skyward. Samit watched, letting out a dry laugh. They're no ordinary humans. In his youth, he had been considered strong by any ordinary measure. That included even those with quirks. In his generation, quirks were relatively simple, and truly overwhelming abilities were rare. His martial arts, honed to near perfection, could defeat almost anyone lacking an exceptionally formidable quirk, and he had proven it time and again. He had swept entire streets in chaotic Kyoto, ensuring no villain could infiltrate, all while constructing his fortress. Yet these two combatants made him seem insignificant in comparison. That very foolish disciple had never even cracked the top 50 in hero rankings, let alone the top 10, thanks to his volatile temper. Still, those who witnessed his combat prowess unanimously agreed that, power-wise, he belonged in the top 10. He recognized his disciple's strength all too well. Yet Kirishima was an unexpected force. While he had always known the boy possessed a devilish talent for martial arts, he hadn't anticipated his quirk to be so potent. To Samit, the explosive energy they exuded transcended human limits. Watching them, he recalled the tanks he'd once seen during exhibition matches at Lumpini, operated by the military. The way those tanks rumbled with powerful engines and belched fire from their barrels. Their fists and legs, colliding with resounding impact, were akin to detonating shells, while their bodies acted like armored fortresses, deflecting the blows with sparks of resistance. Yet, they were far too swift to be likened to tanks. Ah, this is amazing. You're the best too, disciple. What a load of crap. You crazy bastards. Though both had appeared quite fierce before the fight. Hearing them exchange such accolades after trading blows left Samit grumbling in disbelief. He felt a pang of jealousy. He had never lamented his lack of a quirk, but in that moment, doubt crept in. He could never match the sight of those two transcending human limits. For a martial artist, that was only natural. Perhaps it was the weight of age, or the fact that they were his disciples. But Samit felt his heart calm more quickly than expected. Instead, a warm sense of satisfaction flooded over him. Meanwhile, their battle escalated toward its climax. Their bodies collided relentlessly, sweat and every ounce of heat igniting with each clash. Ha 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 ha. Let's see this through to the end, disciple. Gladly. Come at me. Silence fell over the once noisy clearing. The duo silently braced themselves for the final act that would decide their fates. Kirishima steadied his breathing and offered a faint smile. He was, without a doubt, relishing every moment. It was the first time he had ever engaged in a full-scale battle against an equal. Truth be told, he felt slightly outmatched. Though the battle had been evenly matched so far, Takaru had not yet employed the knees and elbows characteristic of Muay Thai clinches. It was as if he had been tempering his ferocity to align with Kirishima's prowess. Even so, he had not been overwhelmed. But at that point, it no longer mattered. He could feel it deep within as they exchanged blows. The disdain once in his eyes had transformed into respect earned through the collision of their bodies. Kirishima, who once bristled at such looks, now inwardly conceded that Takaru had truly earned that respect. Any hostility between them had sublimated into pure fighting spirit, leaving only the quest for victory. "I'm coming," Kirishima said in a low, measured tone. His swollen calf pressed forcefully against the ground. In an instant, his formidable body surged forward, closing the gap. Even Samet's keen eyes struggled to track his speed. A strike, aimed along the shortest path at full speed, seemed to leap across space itself. Kirishima's fist plunged into Takaru's field of vision. It marked the turning point of their fierce brawl. A bright red bead of blood floated faintly through the air. The sound that followed was like the concussive blast of an exploding shell, forcefully hammering into everyone's ears. Kirishima's eyes widened in shock. Takaru had taken a punch square on his forehead and was already twisting his body around. It was an extremely dangerous maneuver, yet he executed it flawlessly. With his eyes widened in defiant excitement, Kirishima tried to sidestep, but there was no time. Takaru's body had almost completed its rotation. Before Kirishima could react further, Takaru's arm transformed and extended to his elbow with a yellowed, almost feral tip, whipped forward like a raging whirlwind straight toward Kirishima's temple. At the sight, Kirishima laughed heartily, releasing all the pent-up desire that had been boiling within him. Ah! The electrifying thrill of the danger, piercing his very spine, felt exhilarating rather than terrifying. Even the searing pain that reverberated through his entire body after the violent impact felt almost comforting. He had restrained himself for far too long. Though Kirishima was the polite, mature son, a part of him, the fierce warrior who reveled in fights where blood flew and flesh was torn, was equally alive and unbridled. Fueled by exhilaration, Kirishima tensed every muscle in his body. With his center of gravity shifted forward, he couldn't evade the incoming blow. The hand meant to block, it was just beginning to retrace the trajectory of the punch. In the end, all that remained was to absorb the hit with his body. As hardening peaked, the polygonal tissue that had reshaped his entire body grew even denser. Even the softer parts, his eyes and hair, turned sharp and unyielding. Ready at last, Kirishima faced the oncoming attack with a terrifying resolve. When hardening shattered, a piercing metallic scream rang out like a banshee's wail. "Ha! I knew both of you were impressive, but..." Samet marveled at how the bout had escalated to a new level. Not only was his first disciple, genius without question, exhibiting formidable prowess, but his second disciple, the one with a devilish talent, was also growing stronger in real time. Though in the first disciple it was more a matter of rapid recovery than raw enhancement. "It's not over yet. Let's keep fighting." "That's more like it. If you'd started whining about the pain as our old master's disciple, I'd have been seriously disappointed. I admire your grit. Honestly, when I first saw you, I thought you were just some underdog your master took in because of your build. But now I admit it. This master-disciple bond is something special." Takaru, sporting a long gash across his forehead, and Kirishima, with shattered temple skin and fragments of hardening, strewn on the floor, exchanged smiles. Seeing them prepare to clash again without even bothering to wipe the blood from their faces, Samet intervened. "Enough. I get how fired up you are, but that's enough, you idiots." "No, old man. We're just getting started." "What do you mean that's enough?" "I agree. Master, I know you both were ready to let loose after a long time, but are you really planning to head home all bloodied?" "Sure, A hospital stop is fine. But if that's your plan, you should be heading there now. Ah, come on. We can just go tomorrow, really? Yeah, I think so too. Rather than calling it quits now, it'd be better to settle the score once and for all. You fools. Sparring ends when the time's up. Besides, Masatake, you brought a kid with you. Are you really gonna leave him behind and come back tomorrow? And Kirishima, don't think you're any different. Tetsuya was busy preparing all sorts of things for tomorrow. So were you really planning to show your face then? More importantly, if you keep going here, it's downright dangerous. Are you two trying to settle a life or death score? It's not like that exactly. Ugh. Just met today and already talking about life or death duels? And you even dragged a kid into this, it's low. In the end, the two relented to Samet's admonition. Kirishima released, hardening, while Takaru let his fierce edge subside as they moved toward each other. When Takaru smiled and extended his hand first, Kirishima returned the smile and grasped it firmly. Watching that, Samet grumbled, "What is this, some cheesy shonen manga friendship? Beat each other to a pulp, then grin and shake hands like everything's all right? No, old man, don't you ever talk about the bond between hot-blooded warriors like that. It's simply a matter of mutual respect." Mutual respect does sound a bit bland, though. Can't think of a better term offhand, I suppose. Takaru looked hurt by Kirishima's remark. But as Kirishima reflected on his own actions, an unsettling shiver ran through him. Just moments before, he had been locked in fierce combat with the man, and now they were smiling and shaking hands? He wasn't always like this in his previous life, yet so long a hiatus from a proper fight had perhaps warped his sense of self. Shaking his head in dismay, Kirishima and Takaru cleaned their wounds using antiseptic from Samet's car, wrapped their bandages, and headed to the hospital. Seated beside Samet at the wheel with arms crossed, Takaru broke the silence. "You probably felt it too, old man, and I know I did. But you understand, right, disciple?" "Huh? What are you saying? If you go off on a tangent like that, I won't be able to keep up." "Is that so? What I mean is, you and I are cut from the same cloth." "Ah, yes. I had an inkling even before we fought, and after actually clashing, it's clear as day. Right? We're warriors through and through. You know why I ended up in prison, don't you? Master gave me the rough version, but I don't know all the details." Takaru uncrossed his arms and stroked his scruffy beard thoughtfully. After a moment's pause, he chose his words deliberately. "I'm not ashamed of taking down a villain. Not in the least. I simply think that I and society never quite fit together." When you put it that way, it does make sense. Kirishima nodded in agreement. If this were a nation where heroes were broadly granted lethal authority against villains, then his actions might have been excused. But being born in Japan, a country too peaceful and conservative in its view of heroes, had perhaps been his misfortune. Of course, being born in Japan was also the reason he'd met Samet and grown stronger. Still, I'm ashamed of the beating that landed me in prison. I was completely wasted and the situation was dire, but even so, nearly killing a civilian was unacceptable. He may have deserved a few blows, no, a lot, but I should have used lawful means instead. I wasn't being mature. What exactly did that guy do? Just remember, he said things to kids that should never have been said. I don't want to repeat the sordid details. Yes, sir. I'll take your word for it. Good. Anyway, what I'm getting at is this. Don't end up like me. Wise words, master. I'm worried that someday he might cause trouble just like you do. Really? Am I really that much of a loose cannon? I like to think I'm pretty even-tempered. Samet and Takaru burst into laughter at Kirishima's remark. Kirishima's face reddened as he realized why they were laughing. Moments ago, intoxicated by the heat of battle, he'd been all for ending things. Now here he was calmly talking it over. It was almost laughable. You are calm most of the time. The trouble is when you're not. Fair enough. We all have our own standards. When someone crosses them, most people shrink back or hope for another day. But you and I, we strike back immediately. Kirishima could not disagree. You're probably cooler-headed than I am, so you'll calculate your moves yourself. And if push comes to shove, your choice will likely be to punish immediately. I can't really argue with that. I don't know if saying it out loud will change anything, but I have to. I'm practically facing a death sentence here. I'm not saying you shouldn't punish wrongdoers, but keep it within bounds. At the very least, don't become like me. Don't let your talent be wasted in mire. At those heavy words, Kirishima sighed deeply. Truth be told, as someone striving to be a hero, he had always been prepared to kill if necessary and even to die. If the situation demanded eliminating an enemy who could only be stopped by death, he would do so without hesitation. He didn't relish the idea of making death a given, but if that was the only path, he was ready to sacrifice his life. He wasn't a 15-year-old kid anymore. He had learned deep in his bones that life doesn't always go as planned. To obtain something of value, one must pay a price, and sometimes that price is life itself. Anyone who makes a career out of battle eventually confronts that harsh truth. Taking down villains? I believe a villain's life is worth less than that of a sewer rat. The problem is our noble citizens don't see it that way. Honestly, pray worrying about predators? This country does have remarkably excellent public safety, doesn't it? When you put it like that, it does sound rather absurd. I think it's downright hilarious. But here's the real issue. It's those very citizens that legitimize a hero. Without their support, stepping off that path turns you from hero to villain in an instant. I've thought about that too. Fundamentally, a hero's authority to use force comes directly from the people. Even our funding is essentially derived from their taxes. Exactly. So what I'm saying is, no matter how angry you get, don't act too rashly in front of those citizens. It's ironic coming from me, given that I once did just that and ended up in prison. No, thank you for the advice. It always hits hardest when the source is someone who's been there. Is that so? With a snort of laughter, he turned his eyes back to the road. While Kirishima pondered his words, they soon arrived at the hospital. This hospital was run by an acquaintance of Samit's, and the director himself treated the two of them. Recalling tales from his younger days when Samit was frequently injured and admonishing them to take it easy, the doctor simply received their nods of acknowledgement. It was something ordinary folks could hardly understand. Though in truth, the two hadn't fought in a truly serious manner. Takaru mentioned that he would stop by on the way back to the mansion to bring the child he was protecting. According to him, that child had suffered the most in the incident that led to the revocation of his hero license, and still bore deep mental scars. Struggling to adjust even in foster care, the child had latched onto Takaru the moment he saw him, eventually accompanying him along. Takaru explained with a bitter smile. The lengthy procedures required to move from prison to Kyoto were partly to blame for the delay. After parting ways for a while, the two returned to the mansion. Tetsuya had been waiting and welcomed them warmly, yet his eyes filled with tears at the sight of Kirishima's bandaged face. "Big brother, are you hurt? Did that old man hit you?" "Huh? I'm hurt. Yes, but it's nothing too serious. But you're all bandaged up. Were you bleeding a lot?" "I was bleeding, yes, but not too much. And yes, that old man did land a hit, but it was just sparring. I hit him back plenty." "Really? I was worried you got injured because of me." "For one thing, I won't get beat up because of you. I'm not the kind of guy who just gets beaten and then limps home. Sometimes I can't tell whether you're naturally good with kids or totally clueless. Tsh. Quit hanging around at the door and come on in." At Samit's clicking of his tongue, they all went inside the mansion. While Kirishima lingered with Samit listening to Tetsuya's chatter, Takaru entered amid a merry commotion, accompanied by the child. The child, with jet black hair flowing down to the waist and delicate, endearing features, was irresistibly cute. "We're back. I didn't expect to see you here again." "Ah, this is Minakawa Rue." "Rue, go on and say hello." The child, clutching Masatake's hand tightly, bowed silently, while Samet and Kirishima greeted Rue in warm, gentle tones. Tetsuya practically attached himself to Rue. Perhaps excited by encountering someone nearly his own age, Tetsuya bombarded Rue with questions so rapidly that the poor kid seemed rather flustered. Takaru laughed heartily and headed towards his room with his luggage. As Rue trotted after him, Tetsuya tried to follow suit, but Kirishima intervened. "Tetsuya, let those two finish unpacking first, then we'll talk. You wouldn't want someone rifling through your stuff in your room, would you?" "Yeah, you're right. I guess I'll wait a bit. Meanwhile, I'll play with Big Brother." After a while of playful banter with Tetsuya, they returned just in time for dinner. Takaru, already well acquainted with the Sri Muang family, naturally blended into the conversation. Though Rue had been wary at first, the delicious food and warm company soon put him at ease. The evening became a tapestry of lively stories woven around the dinner table. Tetsuya even got scolded for spitting out water when he found out Rue was a boy, and Takaru received a playful dressing down from a slightly tipsy Samet. Takaru's unguarded chatter with the Sri Muang family and his ease at sharing the meal painted him as a prodigal son returning after a tumultuous journey. There was an undeniable joy in the way he reunited with those who had shared his childhood. Kirishima silently wished that he would never again have to bow in defeat. At the same time, seeing him finally at home made him acutely aware of how precious his adoptive parents were, lending their unwavering love. Without a family, he would never have been able to grow up so smoothly. No amount of gratitude could ever repay the debt he owed to these loved ones. The same went for the friends who had, in many ways, helped raise him. They too were invaluable. Though each of them had their quirks, they were genuinely good people who cared deeply for Kirishima. Thinking of these blessed connections in his life, Kirishima vowed to protect them at all costs. He felt a pang of regret toward Takaru, but he had no desire to live a life as crooked as his past. He was determined to walk the royal road, protect everyone, and become the strongest of all. Kirishima clenched his fist beneath the table. The final night in Kyoto slipped away, ushering in a new resolve. The train came to a silent stop, its massive bulk gradually easing to a halt. Not a single blast of the train's horn broke the quiet, as if the familiar sound of travel had been forgotten. Contemplating a romance fated by the relentless march of time, Kirishima stepped onto the platform, breathing in the long-missed air of home. The journey had been filled with pleasant encounters and cherished moments, until the latter part when difficulties emerged. Things had gone smoothly right up until his farewell with Samet and the others in Kyoto. Tetsuya had clung to him in tears, but Kirishima had managed to soothe him, and then they parted ways. In their own quiet way, Samet and Takaru, proof enough that they had faced many goodbyes, sent him off with calm resignation. Even meeting Hatsum briefly, after she completed crafting that bone conduction headset fashioned like a crown of thorns, had been a welcome encounter. Though she was a bit exhausting to deal with and he still couldn't fathom why it had to be a crown, her device's performance was undeniable. Most likely, he would end up displaying it at home and replacing it with another gadget that offered only the functionality, yet it was still worth carrying along. After leaving Kyoto, Kirishima headed off to learn wrestling, and encountered the very problem he had feared. "Yeah, that guy was the worst," he muttered. In truth, wrestling wasn't an absolute necessity for someone like Kirishima, whose strength far exceeded that expected for his size. Being able to force an advantageous position and dominate in clinches and takedowns was certainly an asset. But for opponents of ordinary human weight, closing the distance against him proved nearly impossible. Few could withstand punches that exploded forth at supersonic speed with the destructive power of tank shells. Even if they managed to block, the sheer impact would send them hurtling backward. And even if they slipped past the blows and managed to engage him on the ground, they would need a charging speed that outpaced Kirishima's inhuman footwork. Nearly impossible feat. Even if such a miracle occurred, a single swift motion might send them flying. There was also the problem of grappling. Once his hardening activated, Kirishima's body would sharpen like blades, unintentionally inflicting grievous injuries. Still, mastering wrestling or jiu-jitsu would expand his repertoire, and for a gambler, having more cards up one sleeve was always an advantage. Thus, putting aside the temptation to linger longer in Kyoto, he deliberately made his way down to Yamaguchi, only to be greeted by a rotund, middle-aged man whose presence was as imposing as a barrel. Nonetheless, Kirishima maintained his calm as he assessed the situation. It wasn't uncommon for former athletes, once vigorous in their youth, to put on weight after retirement. Having spent years rigorously cutting weight, once the constraints were gone, those long-suppressed appetites would ignite. I figured as much. It was nothing but wishful thinking, and in the end, I was betrayed, he thought. After exchanging greetings with the rather sleazy man, Kirishima found himself led to a dingy hideout where, with his gang, the man attempted to lynch him. Once Kirishima had swiftly subdued them all, he inquired about the reason behind the ambush, receiving an answer so ludicrous it defied belief. The man shrugged, saying he simply wanted to rough up some idiot who prattled about martial arts. Kirishima was flabbergasted but refrained from further violence. Once an opponent was completely neutralized, unleashing more brutality was nothing more than tiring, unless he planned on killing and burying them all. Instead, he leaned close, met the man's gaze and said, "You fool! Watch closely to see how far these idiotic martial artists can rise. In a few years, you'll be seeing my face on TV, with strongest splashed across the screen. And yet, you'll probably still be wallowing like this." After his words, and eyes still trembling with fear, Kirishima turned away. That very day, he headed back up into Kanagawa Prefecture. His destination was to study Yagyu Shinkajiryu, a martial art whose legacy stretched back to the early Edo period. Given its emphasis on armored jujitsu, it seemed a natural fit for his style. While his movements remained unaffected in hardening mode, pushing it to its maximum left him somewhat stiff, a state not unlike wearing full armor. Logistically, it would have made sense to proceed directly from Tokyo, but due to unforeseen circumstances, it had been relegated to a lower priority. Arriving in Zushi City at night, Kirishima managed to secure lodging, only to encounter an awkward hitch. The sole keeper of the martial arts family legacy had been hospitalized due to old age. The other relatives had only learned a rudimentary level of self-defense, leaving none qualified to truly instruct. Thus, the next day he journeyed to Tokyo, spending a few days with Yui and Tadayoshi before returning to Chiba. It was a worthwhile trip, but the ending was a shame, he remarked as he departed the station, drawing the curious eyes of passers-by. His imposing size certainly didn't hurt, nor did the fact that it had been less than a month since he had apprehended a villain at Disneyland. Even in the midst of the heat wave, Kirishima strolled home at a measured pace. Though he hadn't been away long, the streets and the people exuded a strangely comforting familiarity, a nostalgia that belied the normally diverse faces of Japan. A small group of girls, cautiously approaching the duffel bag-wearing hero, began to speak. Though struck by their unfamiliarity, Kirishima responded politely, "Yes? What can I do for you?" The girls, seemingly around his age, listened intently. One timid girl hesitated before asking, "Aren't you the guy who fought at Disneyland?" "That's me. How did you know?" Kirishima admitted with a trace of bemusement. He had made headlines in a few online outlets after defeating a villain when he was in middle school, but that notoriety was confined to a handful of internet news sites. The world was vast, and while stories abounded, it was usually the official heroes on the front lines who commanded the spotlight. "Eek! It's really him," He's even bigger and way more handsome in person. No, seriously. How did you know it was you? Even as Kirishima confirmed their suspicions, the excited girl continued chattering, leaving him without a satisfactory answer. Finally, one of the less exuberant girls explained. A local paper ran an article. They even conducted interviews and posted a video. You're pretty famous around here. Didn't you hear? So the media got involved again. Kirishima pressed a hand to his forehead. He had always sensed that the media brought nothing but trouble. Even if fame were inevitable for a hero, he longed to remain an ordinary citizen, at least for a while. He wasn't about to be pestered with attention as he prepared for his pro debut. Please sign for us. And could you take a picture with us? Ah, yes, of course, he replied with a smile, despite the inconvenience. After all, in his previous life as a sports star, he had learned well that public adoration was part and parcel of both celebrity athletes and heroes alike. After all, one could not exist without their fans, nor could a hero without the admiration of the people. Get lost. As he signed autographs and snapped photos one by one, a commotion erupted from farther away. Turning his head, he saw a tattooed man barreling through the crowd, shoving people aside. Though his face was rather ordinary, the myriad tattoos covering every visible inch of skin gave him a decidedly unsavory look. As the man charged forward, seemingly growing larger and more menacing with every step, Kirishima weighed his options. He considered tripping the brute with a swift leg sweep when suddenly someone collided with the attacker from the side. The man tumbled once, then sprang back to his feet and roared at the top of his lungs. In moments, the once average-built man had expanded to nearly match Kirishima's own formidable stature. The tattoos on his body appeared to be melting away, dripping like wax, adding a grotesque quality to his transformation. "Who the hell are you, bastard? You want to die?" the man bellowed.
Am pro hero hipmunk.
"You're under arrest for unauthorized use of your quirk and pickpocketing," came the retort, delivered by a figure with unmistakably squirrel-like ears and even a squirrel tail peeking above his hips. Despite his round, almost cute appearance, Chipmunk's resolute expression lent his words a striking intensity. "Cut the crap. Like hell you're catching me," the tattooed villain shouted. "Humph. Give up those foolish hopes and submit quietly," Chipmunk replied coolly. The villain, enraged, roared and unleashed a flurry of wild punches. Chipmunk dodged effortlessly and then spat something from his puffed-up cheek. What emerged flew straight into the villain's knee. The villain groaned in pain, collapsing onto one knee. "JHK, you bastard," he muttered. "Then why resist? Stay still," Chipmunk ordered. The villain glared at the approaching hero, his bloodshot eyes narrowing as his body began to trembling that soon escalated into convulsive spasms. "Arg, you think I'm gonna get caught like this? I can't be caught. Not by some guy like you," he shrieked as he slowly rose to his feet. Though his height hadn't changed, the muscles in his entire body swelled explosively, and those melting tattoos now cascaded away rapidly. In a burst of speed that left Chipmunk reeling, the villain slammed into him with several times his previous momentum. Unable to fend off the onslaught, Chipmunk was sent hurtling backward. At the sight, Kirishima fought back the urge to whistle. If he were a football player, that would have been the perfect helmet tackle, even if this wasn't a football field. Chipmunk, sprawled on the ground and coughing up blood, struggled to rise. At a glance, it was clear he was in rough shape. "You were hiding your strength," he managed to say. "Arg," came the guttural reply as the villain roared, his body shaking violently. Then he lunged toward the onlookers, forcing Chipmunk to rush to his defense. Desperation drove Chipmunk forward. He managed to block the villain from harming any civilians, but in doing so, he was struck again by a wild swing of the villain's arm. Whether driven by lost reason or raw fury, the villain howled and pummeled Chipmunk relentlessly. "Is he going to be all right?" one of the onlooking girls whispered. "He looks like he's in a ton of pain," another murmured. "But he's a hero. Why is he just taking it? I hope another hero shows up soon," a third observer added. Kirishima's face darkened at the girl's comments as he watched the scene unfold. Chipmunk was being ruthlessly beaten yet continued to strive to keep the villain away from innocent bystanders. Still, the incredulity of the onlookers, witnessing such a brutal struggle up close, stirred a sense of disillusionment that hadn't been there before. Of course, these girls didn't really understand fighting. They could hardly begin to fathom what a hero thought when standing on the front lines or the price paid in clashes with villains. In truth, Kirishima himself was no stranger to conflict. Born a predator who relished blood-soaked duels against worthy adversaries, he cared little for brawls fought with bystanders behind him. Yet he was not one to back down from a fight. Even as he watched Chipmunk, battered and coughing blood, his persistence in holding off the villain served as a testament to what a true hero might endure when faced with formidable odds. But his motivation was entirely different. While Kirishima, who fought for his own sake, might become an invincible force who never tasted defeat, he could never embody the role of a guardian who protected everyone. That was why he respected people like Chipmunk, individuals whose valor was rooted in selflessness, traits he knew he could never fully claim for himself. "It's dangerous. Step back a little," Kirishima advised in a steady tone, activating his hardening. He moved swiftly towards the nearly collapsing Chipmunk and intercepted the villain's descending fist. "Huff, huff. Boy, it's dangerous. Back off." Even then, Chipmunk's voice from behind urged him to pull back, as if to remove him from the fray. In a calm, almost awed tone, Kirishima replied, "I'm fine. My cork's solid, it won't be broken by that level of attack. More importantly, Mr. Chipmunk, what is it?" Chipmunk gritted his teeth, struggling to answer through the haze of pain that clouded his consciousness. "I'll handle the defense for now, so why don't you finish this? You still have enough fight left in you, right?" "I do. But you're way too reckless. I'm telling you I'm fine. Besides, could you grant me combat authorization? I'm just a regular middle schooler, and if I cause any more trouble, it'll be a disaster. I returned home after such a long absence, and this homecoming is turning out to be quite dynamic," Chipmunk replied. "What? You? You're that kid," the villain finally managed, as if recognizing Kirishima for who he was. With his identity now unmistakably clear, Kirishima clicked his tongue softly. It wasn't hard to recognize him. After all, his height made him unmistakable. Disposing of the bitter sting of unwanted fame, Kirishima fixed the villain with a steely glare and spoke in a low, measured voice. "I don't know who you are, what circumstances you're in, where you live, whether you have a family, or who you're close to. Perhaps you're someone precious to somebody. But you crossed the line, and you shouldn't have." Casually, he swatted away the wild attacks as if brushing off bothersome flies. Though he was seething with the urge to shatter the villain's head right then and there, he restrained himself. A full display of his power in public would be far too excessive. Besides, taking down another villain so soon, without proper authorization, wouldn't reflect well on him. It might even undermine the credit due to Chipmunk, who had held the villain at bay through a grueling, bloody struggle. Had the situation been dire and the opponent truly formidable, Kirishima would not have hesitated to unleash his full might. But today, the villain was weak, so weak that within the confines of authorized combat, he could not dare act rashly without permission. Kirishima's eyes burned coldly as he continued to scrutinize his foe. People often mistake speed and power for what makes a true powerhouse. Speed and power are, of course, important. Generally speaking, the faster and stronger you are, the better. But there is something just as essential, if not more so. Insight. No matter how fast or powerful you may be, Without insight, you can never be truly complete. Conversely, even someone who is comparatively slow and weak can exploit the tiniest opening and strike decisively if they possess insight. This is especially true in martial arts, where a single blow can decide a match in combatants, despite wearing plain clothes, wield weapons, but it applies just as much in any fighting arena. Kirishima, who had already reached a high level of mastery, maintained the upper hand in almost every close-quarters confrontation. The villain before him was no exception. Boring. His strength is mediocre, his speed about the same, and he lacks even basic technique. No, should I say he's lost all sense. The fight unfolded with overwhelming one-sidedness. Even though less than a minute had passed since Chipmunk granted him a provisional combat permit, Kirishima calmly marked his target. The fading, dripping tattoo on the villain had already dissolved to more than half its former self. Watching the vibrant stains spread across the floor, Kirishima mused that the guy might as well try his hand at modern art. That was how ineffective his assault had been. Characterized by huge, overblown windups that practically shouted, "I'm attacking now," sluggish speed and power, and a complete absence of calculated intent. It almost made Kirishima miss Takaru, the burly, foul-mouthed man he had clashed with not long ago. Finding it remarkable that this failure made him long for Takaru's raw, unrefined energy, Kirishima felt a rare kinship and reached out to take the man's hand. The villain roared and thrashed, but he couldn't break free from Kirishima's grip. Then Chipmunk sprang over the struggling foe's head. He looped his tail around the man's neck and spun gracefully in midair, landing with his weight driving downward. He flipped the villain onto his back and held him down while methodically choking him. Isn't that a bit dangerous? Kirishima thought the move looked oddly familiar, like something he'd seen a few times in pro wrestling during his previous life. Was it called a Hurricane Rana? Though he hadn't been particularly interested in pro wrestling, the flashy technique had left its mark on him. Watching the display, Kirishima couldn't help but think it wielded far too much killing power. It was so acrobatic that it almost seemed impossible to pull off, but once executed, the impact was undeniable. The villain, who had been flailing helplessly, soon lost consciousness and slumped limp. Chipmunk quickly restrained him and turned back to Kirishima. "It's over. I can't believe I struggled with someone like this. It's a bit embarrassing. Thanks for your help, kid. Had you not intervened, the civilians might have been hurt. Ah yes, I hope I didn't cause any unnecessary trouble." Chipmunk smiled broadly and extended his hand for a shake. Though his expression betrayed a hint of embarrassment over not handling it entirely on his own, there was no trace of jealousy or resentment toward Kirishima. Looking down at Chipmunk, who was just a head shorter than him, Kirishima accepted the offered hand. He appreciated how Chipmunk hadn't backed down even when the situation looked grim, and admired his effort to protect the civilians. But it was his fairness after the fight that truly won him over. Honestly, it's not a good situation. Even if it was unavoidable, getting entangled with villains before you're fully qualified isn't exactly ideal. Yes, I'd rather not get involved until I have my hero license, but it never seems to work out that way. This time it was my mistake. I let my guard down and got caught, which dragged you into the fray. For that, I owe you an apology. In a voice that belied his cute appearance, Chipmunk bowed respectfully to Kirishima. Startled, Kirishima quickly helped him to his feet, waving off any further apologies. "Not at all. You would have handled it just fine on your own. I just happened to help you corner him a little faster." "Ah, no need to praise me. Anyone can see it was a dangerous situation." Laughing heartily as he candidly acknowledged the risk, Chipmunk's frankness was truly impressive. After all, admitting one's own mistakes or admitting to a crisis in front of a crowd isn't easy. "Your name was Kirishima, right? I think I read about you in the news." "Yes,
I'm Kirishima Eiro."
I understand why you got the go-ahead to fight, and I agree it was the smartest move in that moment. Still, if you can, try to let another hero handle these situations next time. Of course, I don't plan on diving into every little thing and causing a scene. Good. In the end, you still ended up entangled in the incident. I'm sorry once again. I'll make sure the police hear my side of the story, so don't worry. Look, the police are here. Please wait a moment. Yes. After reassuring Kirishima, Chipmunk walked over to the arriving officers. Kirishima watched him go, a mix of admiration and unease stirring in his chest. He wasn't tall, and his build was rather slight. His torn, battered face told the story of a hard-fought battle. His costume, drenched in sweat and blood, was all he had left to show for his efforts. And yet, the back he showed as he walked away wasn't shabby at all. No one could ever say otherwise. Silently saluting the heroism in his heart, Kirishima turned back to the spot where he'd been standing. There, by the familiar duffel bag he'd left during his travels, a group of girls waited, holding his bag. As he approached, they burst into excited chatter. Wow, that was seriously amazing. Yeah, but why did you only block? Seeing that they meant no harm, Kirishima sighed inwardly. They weren't malicious. It was simply a cultural clash, a misunderstanding of how to properly honor heroes and warriors who had become celebrity figures, reducing a fierce battle to mere entertainment. He had no desire to blame them now. Still, unable to remain silent, Kirishima picked up his bag and said, ladies? No, that sounds too formal. Let's just say friends. Friends? Friends? Does that mean we get to be friends with you? There's nothing wrong with being friends. As long as you do me one favor. What kind of favor? Just tell us. From now on, if a hero is battling a villain, please keep your distance. If possible, leave the area entirely. A hero might try to protect you, but that isn't always possible. Okay, we'll do that. And even if the hero starts to falter, please cheer them on. Those who stand on the front lines deserve respect. No one ever pushed heroes into fighting villains. These are people who risk their lives. Not everyone can be as strong as All Might, but even the weaker heroes bleed for you. Watching the girls grow solemn at his words, Kirishima realized they weren't bad at all. They just came from a different culture. In his previous life in America, people understood that all too well. Even in America, some World War I veterans received smaller benefits than those who fought in the War of Independence nearly 140 years earlier. And when the Great Depression set in, there was even an incident where veterans gathered to demand their bonuses, only to be crushed under tanks. Such events gradually taught people that those who shed blood for the nation, society, and civilians deserved respect and honor. In the era Kirishima lived in, when someone in uniform passed by, people would salute in their own way. Here, heroes were seen more as celebrities or high earners, entirely different from his past life. After all, the notion of heroes as fighters or warriors had long since faded. Everyone agreed that combat skills were necessary to be a hero, but since battles with villains had become a kind of show, the basic rule of staying out of the fray was often ignored. No one really knew how long it would take or how many incidents would be needed to change that perception. Thinking this through, Kirishima clapped his hands to capture the girls' attention as the conversation grew heavy. All right, enough of the gloomy talk. As promised, let's be friends. I still don't know your names, so why not introduce yourselves? You might have already heard mine. I'm Kirishima Ijiro. At that, the girls' faces lit up and they crowded around him one by one. After a while of introductions and even exchanging phone numbers, Kirishima was finally free, though only because the police had come to request statements from everyone involved. Shortly after parting with his new friends, albeit abruptly, Kirishima met with the officer in charge. The officer explained that, although he'd heard the full story from Chipmunk, Kirishima needed to accompany him to the station to give a statement. Kirishima agreed, having been prepared for this moment from the start. Judging by the officer's kind look, thanks to Chipmunk's glowing account, everything was unfolding in the most ideal way. Just as Kirishima was about to follow the officer, Chipmunk approached him and said, "Thanks for today. Kirishima, you're aiming to become a hero too, right?" "Yes. For now, I'm targeting UA," Kirishima replied. "I see. With your skill, you'll no doubt pass the practical exam. You only need to get through the written test."
UA.
Even offers work-study programs with pro heroes. Did you know that? I looked into the curriculum before, so I did. Good. You're so impressive that I wouldn't be surprised if every hero with half an eye ended up trying to recruit you. But if fate allows, let's meet again someday. And don't worry, I'm not pressuring you or anything. With that, Chipmunk patted Kirishima on the shoulder and departed with a laugh. Kirishima bowed respectfully toward the small figure disappearing into the distance, his tail swaying gently behind him. Chipmunk was a warrior who never backed down and a guardian who refused to yield. A man who, although not as strong as Kirishima, was unquestionably worthy of respect. With that thought in mind, Kirishima followed the officer with a determined smile. After finishing his statement at the police station, he emerged into an already late afternoon. The scorching sun had softened somewhat, yet it still greeted Kirishima warmly. Reflecting on the day's events, he found himself pondering anew the true value of a hero. Boxers in his previous life weren't simply made overnight. A boxer was forged through grueling effort, by shedding blood and grinding away at their very being. No matter how ordinary a boxer might appear, behind every display in the ring lay years, sometimes decades, of relentless hardship. They sacrificed roughly 80,640 minutes, or even more for the mere 36 minutes spent fighting in the ring. Through that vicious cycle of pain, intensity, and gradual transformation, a boxer was ultimately completed. And yet, even then, they can vanish in an instant. Even a fighter who had endured such a grueling process could lose everything in a moment. Kirishima was living proof of that harsh truth. In that sense, heroes were not so different. From a societal perspective, heroes weren't born free of charge. Almost every teenager aspired to be a hero, so talented individuals were rarely overlooked. But merely having talent didn't guarantee a hero's future. The competition was brutal, and sometimes the quirks of an individual just didn't mesh well with the demands of the exam. Even those who passed and entered hero training often stumbled on the road to becoming a true hero. Even once they did, they were only at the starting line. They had yet to overcome countless obstacles on the journey ahead. Ultimately, becoming a hero meant revealing your quirk to the world. In battles where one quirk clashed against another, having your ability exposed was a serious liability. Living as a hero meant accepting every penalty and becoming strong enough to both combat villains and survive. To truly succeed, one had to endure all of that while still internalizing the essence of being a hero. Of course, it was understood that individual sacrifice of sweat and passion was expected, and that society would invest heavily in these efforts. That was why heroes were regarded as precious resources, nurtured at enormous social cost and yet always at risk of being lost. They were fighters by trade, yet even the mightiest could vanish in an instant. Come to think of it, isn't it odd that true heroes rarely cross the line? Real heroes seldom cause chaos. Now, that reminds me, Takaru really did create a huge mess. TSK. As Kirishima made his way home, marveling once again at the resilience of a true warrior, he sidestepped a flying object coming straight at him. Reaching out, he caught the small bag he'd been carrying and looked ahead. There, with her signature pink hair and striking black eyes, stood a girl, her face flushed with anger. "Eiji-chan, you traitor!" Her furious outburst made Kirishima find her both adorable and exasperating, and he scratched his chin in mild bemusement. It was a reunion far more troublesome than encountering a villain in battle. From afar, Kirishima appeared tranquil as he approached. Suddenly, Mina felt her entire body heat up. Her heart pounded, her breaths came in quick gasps, and the clenched fist trembled uncontrollably. She realized with a shock that she was angrier at Kirishima than she had ever imagined. When he first left on his trip, she had been fine. Kirishima often spent his weekends at Mustafu, visiting Midoriya and Bakugo. Sometimes Mina accompanied him. It wasn't unusual for him to be away from her side for a day or two. Perhaps that was why the 2 days he was gone had passed so unremarkably. The training he had meticulously organized went on as planned, yet Mina also enjoyed outings with friends and indulged in delicious food. But that idiot never called, even though he promised he'd check in every day. She fumed silently. As Kirishima's messages grew infrequent, Mina's own heart began to waver. The friend with whom she had spent nearly every day since the age of 3 had carved a deeper place in her heart than she ever realized. Still, she knew better than anyone how strong Kirishima was, so she tried not to worry too much. It was hard to believe they were even the same age. Kirishima's strength was such that even grown-ups rarely felt threatened by him. At least, that's what she believed, until she read the article announcing that Kirishima had apprehended a villain. The fool had promised to avoid dangerous situations, yet he had once again clashed with a villain. Among the indelible memories Mina had of Kirishima, one was that summer trip when she was just 5 years old. "I was so scared back then. I never imagined something like that could happen," she recalled in a tremulous voice. Watching him battle a villain, even after suffering a deep stab wound in the abdomen and struggling until he nearly collapsed, had been both shocking and terrifying at the time. Later, when she realized he had fought so hard to protect her, she felt an overwhelming mix of sorrow and gratitude. Back then, all Mina could do was tremble behind him as he fought on, bleeding profusely. Yet, aside from those conflicted emotions, that incident revealed Kirishima's true character. The big, strong friend who always shielded her and reached out first would never spare himself in battle, no matter how grievous his wounds. Even if he were stabbed, shot, or even lost an arm or a leg, if a fight beckoned, Kirishima would never back down. And that was why she worried. According to the article, he hadn't suffered any life-threatening injuries, yet Mina had no idea where or how he might have been hurt. After all, the villain he'd faced was undoubtedly formidable. Even amid the chaos, she had refrained from disturbing him and waited for his call. But none came. One day after reading the article, unable to shake off her growing unease, Mina finally phoned Kirishima. On the other end, his voice was calm and measured. Although a part of her wanted to chide him, she refrained from badgering a friend who had just endured something significant. After ending the conversation on a pleasant note, Mina felt a brief relief upon hearing that he was unharmed. Yet even that reassurance did little to ease her mind, and his messages grew increasingly infrequent. The intervals stretched from 2 days to 3, and eventually from 3 days to an entire week. Though the silence unsettled her, she knew it was simply his nature, so she held her tongue. He had at least informed her he'd be returning today, so she had planned to meet him the following day after a well-deserved rest. That was her plan, until, while idly watching a video at home, she saw footage that shattered her expectations. Someone had posted a clip on social media of Kirishima stopping a villain, and it spread like wildfire, catching Mina's eye. Recognizing him instantly, she clicked her tongue in exasperation. That idiot had stirred up trouble on the very day he was meant to return home. Unable to sit still any longer, Mina bolted out of the house. She wasn't sure where to go, but she knew exactly which route Kirishima would take on his way back. She waited under the scorching sun, and before long, Kirishima appeared. He looked unervingly composed, far too calm for someone who was supposed to have caused a commotion. "Ijiro, you traitor!" Before she even realized it, her hand had already sprung into action. Before she could stop it, the bag she was carrying sailed through the air, headed straight for Kirishima's face. With a hint of mischief, Kirishima sidestepped effortlessly, caught the bag, and fixed his gaze on her. Noticing him awkwardly scratching his chin, the simmering anger inside Mina surged, and she lunged forward. "Hey, you idiot! You said you wouldn't do anything dangerous. So why on earth did you fight a villain twice in just 1 month?" She struck his arm without mercy, wincing at the stinging pain that shot through her palm. It wasn't as if she had hit a solid block of steel. He hadn't activated his hardening, but Kirishima's lean, muscular frame was so unforgiving that even a simple hit stung. Kirishima stammered an awkward explanation. "No, it's just that things happen the way they did. Truly, I had no other choice. Just calm down for a moment and hear me out, Mina." "No, you idiot. Even if things happen by chance, why should I have to learn about it from a news article or the internet? Wouldn't it have been better if you told me first?" "Ugh, that really hurts. Could you just give me a break? Let me explain everything first." Under the relentless barrage of Mina's slaps, Kirishima recoiled in shock and darted away. Even though he knew he deserved every hit, his retreat was little more than a feigned attempt to evade the scolding. "Idiot, I was really worried about you." "Yeah, sorry." At Mina's plaintive remark, her eyes already misted with unshed tears, Kirishima scratched his chin again and offered another apology. As was her habit when feeling awkward, Mina lifted her eyes to meet his. Apart from the scar along his jaw from when his quirk first manifested, his face was impeccably clean. Yet behind that handsome, tidy exterior lurked the fierce determination of a man ready to bare his fangs and crush his enemies. No matter how grievous his injuries, he would never hold back. Mina resented how others raved over Kirishima without ever understanding the hardships he endured. Only a select few, herself, Midoriya, Bakugo, and his parents, truly recognized the sweat and pain he poured into becoming strong. Among them, she was likely the only one who knew every detail of his rigorous training and battle-frenzied nature. Most people merely admired his flashy exterior and cheered him on, oblivious to the cost, while Kirishima pressed forward relentlessly. Of course, the choice was his alone, and he would decide his path on his own terms. Mina could not change his course, but at the very least, she longed to walk beside him, to be a haven he could return to when battered and weary. A life devoted entirely to the relentless battle was an unbearably harsh fate. Just as Kirishima had once reached out to her when they first met, Mina wished to become someone he could lean on. "Your mom and dad were worried sick too. They even called me to ask what was going on, wondering if I knew anything. Ugh, I'm really sorry. I'm the worst." With an expression of genuine regret, Kirishima replied, knowing deep down that he had been incredibly careless. But his introspection was abruptly cut short by Mina's unexpected action. Standing over 40 centimeters shorter than him, Mina stretched out her hand and tenderly touched his cheek. "Idiot. I know you, Mom, Dad, and I all know that you're going to keep fighting. And since we're both bound to become heroes, we can't avoid conflict forever. So I'm not going to tell you to stop fighting, or even to avoid getting hurt. We can't choose our battles. A tough fight always leaves a scar, doesn't it? Yeah. But please, don't keep it a secret from me. If you end up hiding your wounds and I find out from a news article, I'll worry that you're trying to cover them up. Just tell me when you're in pain or if things get tough. You can always be honest with me." Gazing into Mina's eyes, those golden discs set in dark pearls, Kirishima felt the passage of time all over again. 12 years ago, the timid little girl who had hesitated to speak and nervously observed her peers had grown up, and it was both astonishing and heartwarming to hear her say that he could lean on her. Feeling the wonder of time, Kirishima smiled. Then he wrapped one arm around Mina and lovingly ruffled her hair with the other. "All right, I promise. From now on, I won't hide anything from you." "Thank you." "No, thank you." Really, I should be the one grateful. I guess this life wasn't wasted after all. To have a friend who cares about me like this. Seeing the satisfied look on Kirishima's face, Mina suddenly became aware of her own awkward posture and blushed deeply. Startled, she wriggled free from his embrace and said loudly, flustered, "Then let's hurry up and go. Your parents must be waiting, and it's sweltering out here. Yeah, we've delayed too long already." "You should come with me too," Kirishima replied. "Huh? It's been a while since I've seen them." "I'm fine," she retorted. "It's only been a month. You haven't even stepped foot in our house since my trip," he teased. "Still, I feel like I shouldn't be intruding," she admitted. "Our house is just 5 minutes away. You came all the way here, so why back out now? I'm sure my parents will be delighted to see you." Dragging a hesitantly retreating Mina along, Kirishima led the way home and soon arrived. After deactivating the digital lock and stepping inside, his mother rushed out. "Oh my goodness! Look who it is! Isn't this my son? The one who promised to call every day but hasn't even called once in 2 days. Mom, I know you're upset, but we haven't seen each other in a month. Can't you let it go for now?" Seeing his mother's raw display of disappointment, Kirishima broke into a cold sweat. Mina looked at him as though she hadn't realized his parents could be this blunt. Kirishima felt once again the heavy burden of his past mistakes. Fortunately, his mother's sulking subsided quickly. Within moments, she beamed broadly and enveloped Kirishima in a warm hug. Kirishima bent his knees slightly and pressed his forehead against hers. "You really should have called more often. We were so worried about you. You weren't hurt anywhere, were you?" "Yes, I'm perfectly fine." "Not a scratch," he replied. "Although you did battle with a villain, right?" At Mina's interjection from the sidelines, Kirishima's face contorted in exasperation. "You mean Disneyland? I was totally shocked back then. I even found myself wondering why it seems like disaster always follows you wherever you go." As he fumbled for words, Mina interjected once again. "No, I mean, today you were on your way home after fighting a villain again. What? Are you seriously okay?" She hurriedly examined him from head to toe. Finding no sign of injury, she sighed and finally said, "Is our son really a man who seems to drag calamity with him? I just don't understand it. It does seem that trouble tends to gather around Ijiro, but that's not the issue. The real problem is that he rushes headlong into danger." True, Ijiro has never been one to run away or stand on the sidelines. If something needs doing, he dives right in to see it through. Exactly. Ijiro is far too fearless. I can't help but worry about him, someone added softly. The three sighed in unison. Watching them, Kirishima scratched his chin. "Still, it's a relief that you have a friend like Mina who cares and watches over you. As a parent, that's so reassuring." "No, it's not just about physical protection. I really hope you'll always have Mina by your side," his mother said with a knowing smile. Mina lowered her eyes, unable to meet hers. Stepping further inside, Kirishima interjected, "All right, that's enough. I'll just put my bags away for now. Mina, since you're here, do you want to join us for dinner?" "Huh? No, I just planned on eating at home since I dropped in unexpectedly," she replied. "Oh, Mina, since it's been so long, why don't you stay and eat? I'll let your mom know," he said. "All right then, I'll do that," she agreed. After some coaxing, Mina accepted the invitation and joined Kirishima's mother in the living room. Having been a frequent guest at Kirishima's house since she was very young, the sight of the two of them chatting warmly together was reminiscent of a mother and daughter. Returning from his room after putting his bags away, Kirishima smiled at the scene. For some reason, it felt as though he had been on an incredibly long journey and had finally returned home. The warm, familiar feeling was remarkably comforting. It was nothing like the life he had once known in a glamorous mansion. Back then, He had never felt that true sense of coming home. But in this life, he was certain that no matter what happened or who he became, his home would always welcome him back. The difference was the people. Unlike his past life, when no one had endeared themselves to him, here the people were his home. These were the faces he was determined to protect, no matter the cost. In the graceful curve of his eyes, a quiet resolve burned brightly. It was a true homecoming. That day was no different from any other. The eventful yet rewarding summer vacation had ended, and Kirishima was back at school. Life among his friends in uniform had resumed. He had grown so rapidly that the custom-made clothes, crafted with a 2-meter frame in mind, were finally beginning to fit him perfectly. After a tedious morning, it was time for lunch, the moment to savor the lovingly packed bento his mother had prepared. After demolishing the hearty meal suited to his build, Kirishima excused himself from his friends and stepped outside for a while. Although he and Mina usually did everything together, they now ate lunch with their own groups. When they were in the same class until second year, it made no difference. But once they were split into different classes in third year, that was just how things naturally fell into place. It wasn't a big change anyway. After school, they were always together. Possessing a maturity that sometimes belied his age and his previous life, Kirishima often strolled to the schoolyard at lunch to watch the younger students playing. There was something heartening about seeing those fresh faces bask in their carefree peace. As he made his way behind the school buildings toward the yard, he caught voices up ahead. "You have a quirk that can transform leaves? That's amazing. Turn some into 10,000 yen bills for me. I'm tight this month. Making banknotes is against the rules. Besides, your transformations wear off too quickly. Then just spend them before they fade." The bespectacled boy and the kid with the pug nose were badgering a small youngster whose features were hard to place. Somewhere between a mouse and a raccoon dog, the little one, caught between them, looked completely intimidated. Kirishima watched them for a moment, clicked his tongue, and then strode over. Am I really the kind of guy who attracts trouble? Or should I say, I'm the kind who jumps headlong into it? Hey guys, want to see something interesting? Casually draping a hand over each of their shoulders, he spoke, and the two boys slowly turned to face him. Their awkward, stiff smiles made it seem as if their necks had been replaced by rusty, ungreased gears. Kirishima, one stuttered. "We," the other began, clearly at a loss for words. Watching them stammer, Kirishima tightened his grip on their shoulders. "Gah! It hurts," one whimpered. "You idiots! Is making money with your quirk a crime or not?" It's a crime." Long ago, Baron John Maynard Keynes said that debasing currency was the most evil and surest way to destroy society's established order. Do you understand what that means? We get it, now let go already. Seeing how much pain they were in, Kirishima eased up. Only then did the two start rubbing their shoulders as if rescued from the brink of collapse, while Kirishima couldn't hide how pathetic he found them. TCH. You don't need some old sage's words to know that counterfeiting or altering currency can land you in prison for life, or at least 3 years. I know you're idiots, but learn to tell what you can and can't get away with. Do you really think you can pull that crap with your quirk and not get caught? And you weren't even doing it yourselves, you dragged in a junior who didn't want any part of it. How embarrassing. The two simply frowned at his lecture, saying nothing further. Ever since he first entered middle school, Kirishima had been the undisputed strongest student. There were rumors about his gigantic frame and even whispers that he honed his martial arts because of Ishido, but the incident that truly cemented his reputation was something else entirely. In his first year, he had clashed with an ill-tempered senior, and the display of raw power he unleashed, as a stark warning, changed everything. Ignoring the provocations of the senior, he casually struck a nearby tree. The tree, thick as a human torso, split apart where his fist met it, collapsing in one blow. From that day on, No one ever dared mess with Kirishima, and he was officially crowned the school's #1. Fortunately, his good-natured personality meant that his newfound reputation brought no misery. In fact, the under-the-table bullying, extortion, and ostracism all dropped sharply. That was because Kirishima openly despised such behavior. He didn't actively seek out trouble to stop it, but if he witnessed it firsthand, he would never stand by and do nothing, just as he had done today by stopping those two idiots from taking things too far. I'm not about to give you some sermon about honest living or hitting the books, so just don't go around bullying others, you idiots. Now get lost. With a dismissive wave, he sent the two boys scurrying away like frightened mice. You should get going too. Good job not falling for their nonsense. If anyone pulls that again, come find me in class 3A. You know my name, right? Thank you. You're the most famous person at our school, Kirishima. Of course we know you, one replied. Is that so? Then you should head out too. Lunch break's almost over. Watching the junior bow and leave, Kirishima called out. So? Nothing to say, you guys watching? Of course we do. You're still such a brute. And still way too nosy. So you just stood there and watched? Why would we, when you'd handle it anyway? Is that so? TCH. Kirishima's voice rang out in the suddenly quiet space, and two more friends emerged from behind the bushes. They answered in a carefree tone, though they weren't as foolish as the ones he just rebuked. Their chatter still made Kirishima click his tongue in disapproval. These guys acted as if he were some sort of cartoon hero, a modern-day Doraemon, no less. They'll only learn when they've faced something they can't handle on their own. TCH. If I can't fix it, then it must be a huge disaster. Something I'd never want to see happen. Sighing inwardly, Kirishima gave up on watching the hopeless antics of youth and decided to spend the remainder of the break watching videos instead. He pulled up a video featuring the hero Crimson Riot, a figure from a book of great heroes his mother had bought him as a child. Honestly, when he was younger, he had no interest in reading old-world biographies, so he'd ignored it at first. But one day, he accidentally dropped the book, triggering the hologram tucked inside, and he found himself watching an interview with Crimson Riot. The interview was surprisingly relatable, but what caught his attention even more was how similar the hero's quirk seemed to his own. Before long, Kirishima was searching for more Crimson Riot videos. The footage was old and grainy, yet his distinctive style shone through. Crimson Riot was a world apart from Kirishima. While Kirishima favored a straightforward, hit-and-don't-get-hit approach, Crimson Riot employed his defensive quirk to absorb attacks and charge forward relentlessly. He's from the previous generation, so I wasn't expecting much, but this really opened my eyes, Kirishima thought. He'd been mulling over ways to use his own quirk more effectively. At present, despite it being called hardening, Kirishima was employing his ability much like an enhancement, maximizing his explosive speed, raw strength, and the evasive edge granted by his sharpened senses and aerial control. Yet in doing so, he wasn't fully capitalizing on his hardening potential. In contrast, Crimson Riot made full use of his formidable defense, drawing in enemy attacks, shielding his allies, and then surging forward to subdue his foes. It was an impressive display. Kirishima knew his way of using his quirk wasn't wrong, but if he was to truly live as a hero, there would come a time when he had to protect others. And when that moment arrived, he couldn't afford to freeze up. The battle footage of Crimson Riot became the perfect lesson, and whenever he had a spare moment, Kirishima watched the videos intently to learn a new fighting style. Oh, isn't that a Shido? Yeah. Their brief exchange pulled him out of his reverie. Looking ahead, he spotted a Shido in the distance, accompanied by the two boys he'd just reprimanded. And the junior he'd helped was with them too. Ashido said something to the awkward group, and then, without warning, all four burst into a breakdance routine. Kirishima let out a dry laugh. He had no idea what was going on. How does a casual conversation suddenly turn into a dance-off? After a few energetic moves, the group eventually dispersed on friendly terms. One of his friends called out, "You're impressive too, Kirishima, but isn't Ishido the real standout?" "Yeah, Ishido is amazing, flashy, brilliant in both academics and sports, and with a great personality. Not to mention her quirk and her knack for persuasion. She's even applied to UA, so she truly embodies the new generation of heroes." "What, do I come off as old school?" "Not exactly, but isn't it strange? You're handsome, excel in every field, academics, sports, and combat, and you're the strongest in our school. Yet you seem so different from Ishido. She seems capable of anything, while you're all about fighting. Yeah, I don't quite fit the mold of either the old or the new generation. If anything, Kirishima, you just feel like, well, a bit detached and aloof, though if you look closer, you're not really cold at all, you're just a bit odd." "Is that a compliment or an insult? Pick one, you idiots." And so lunch break came to an end. As always, Kirishima went home with Ishido. Break time equals 0. 5s/. Watching Ishido chatter away beside him, he spoke carefully. "Mina, can I ask you something?" "Huh? What is it?" "If it's about Ijiro, I can answer almost anything." "No, nothing that grand. I just noticed those 3 kids were talking during lunch, and then suddenly, they started dancing." "Oh, those guys?" "Yeah. How did that happen?" Mina replied without missing a beat. "Masanori, the short junior." "Oh, him. What about him?" "He told Nagahisa and Takizo never to ask him for that kind of favor again." "Nagahisa and Takizo? You mean the guy with the glasses and the pug nose?" "Yeah. Anyway, after hearing that, they all got so red-faced that I stepped in. I figured a fight was about to break out." "Ah, so their little chat ended with a dance-off, huh? United through dance? What do you mean? United through dance sounds so cheesy. It's not about style. It's about the meaning behind it." Having satisfied his curiosity, Kirishima turned away and frowned. There, standing before a man easily estimated to be over 3 meters tall, were 2 girls in school uniforms, their eyes wide with terror. Ishido, just catching sight of them, flinched too. The enormous man appeared to be asking the girls something. As Kirishima tapped into his enhanced senses, an electric chill ran down his spine. He couldn't tell exactly how strong the man was, but there was no doubt, this guy was powerful. Even by Kirishima's high standards, he'd always claimed fewer than 20 heroes were stronger than him. The newcomer's strength defied immediate judgment. Typically, such uncertainty only arose when someone was absurdly weak or absurdly strong, and a man over 3 meters tall was hardly weak. Kirishima assumed it was the latter. No sooner had he quietly activated his hardening than he sensed Ishido stirring. Her heart pounded, her shoulders trembled, and her calves tightened as if she were about to bolt. Realizing she might rush into danger, Kirishima immediately gripped her shoulder. If that man turned out to be a villain, Ishido wouldn't stand a chance. She'd be finished before she could even react. If anyone was going to step in, it had to be him. Locking eyes with Ishido, who looked up at him pleadingly, Kirishima sprang into action. He spotted the man reaching for the outer wall above the girls at the very moment he made his move. Moving with a speed far beyond what ordinary eyes could catch, Kirishima darted between the man and the girls and seized the attacker's massive wrist. The wrist was so enormous that even Kirishima's long fingers could barely close around it. Though the man didn't seem to be exerting full force, his hand, suspended in midair and trembling under their mutual grip, told all. Kirishima could feel the difference immediately. "He's stronger than me." "No, of course he is." Kirishima himself was nearly 2 meters tall, but this man towered over him by more than a full meter. Even with his hardening quirk bolstering him, Kirishima could tell that his opponent was equally supported by some similar power, for not an inch was lost in raw strength. Neither fighter had gone all out, nor had either employed their recently refined techniques, Yet the balance of power was unmistakable. Studying the man who showed no sign of strain, only a flicker of surprise, Kirishima allowed his eyes to settle. I can't be sure I'd win. Physically, I'm at a clear disadvantage. If things go south, I might have to block him with my body, even risk my life. Sir, you can't do this. Why are you frightening these young girls? I have not frightened them. I was merely asking for directions. For someone of his imposing appearance, his tone was disarmingly polite, and Kirishima sensed that perhaps there was room for negotiation. At that moment, he detected no overt hostility from the man. Could it be that his shabby clothes and massive frame were deceiving? No, that was impossible. Even if he weren't a villain, one thing was clear. He wasn't a good man. The predatory aura radiating from him made Kirishima feel utterly overpowered. A heavy, beastly presence. Suppressing the surge of fighting spirit rising in his chest, Kirishima knew he couldn't face a man of this caliber in a crowded city street. The damage would be unimaginable. Peering out from the shadow of the low-hanging hood, he said calmly, "If you need directions, I can help. I've lived here all my life." "Where are you trying to go?" "I'm trying to get to Springer's hero office, but I don't know the way. Do you happen to know it?" It's a bit complicated to explain. Kirishima pulled up a map on his phone and walked the man through the route, carefully pointing out their current location. The man thanked him in a voice that echoed as if from deep inside a cavern, saying, "Thank you. All things are for the master." After that brief remark, he turned and walked away. Watching him disappear, Kirishima turned around. At that moment, Ashido rushed over and threw herself at him, and the girls clung to him as well. "Ijiro, are you okay?" "Wah, that was so scary. If Kirishima hadn't been here, we'd have been finished. I'm not even sure it was that serious, but with him gone, you can all relax now." Seeing the girls burst into tears, Kirishima clenched his fist. For the first time in his life, someone's overwhelming presence had forced him to reckon with his own limitations. As the wide world revealed itself, with countless strong individuals roaming it, he realized that this wouldn't be their last encounter. Grinding his teeth, he vowed that next time he would never simply let it pass. He would grow stronger still, until he could one day overwhelm any man he might face on his path to becoming the strongest. That day, Kirishima's pride took a heavy blow. The indifferent evening sun, summoning its last rays, bathed him in a fading light as the chance collision with the giant drew to a close. Time passed quickly, and the day of the UA entrance exam finally dawned. Kirishima stood at the front door in his school uniform. There was no strict dress code, but in Japan it was generally understood that students wore uniforms while adults donned suits for formal events. Although Kirishima disliked uniforms because they limited his movement, he still chose to follow society's unspoken rules. After all, what he wore was hardly of any consequence. "Ijiro, are you heading out now?" "Yes, I'll be back after I pass," he replied. His mother greeted him with a bright smile. Knowing his considerable abilities even in a vague way, she wasn't worried about him failing. It wouldn't be entirely accurate to say she felt no anxiety as a parent, but she trusted her son implicitly. After all, he had been an extraordinary child from the start. "All right then, take care, and don't get too nervous." "Of course, it would be embarrassing as your son if I even got nervous over an exam. And there you are, calling me Mom again." "Ah, sorry, Mom. I'm off." With a reassuring smile, Kirishima bid her goodbye and left the house. At the meeting place, Ashido was already waiting. Dressed in her school uniform as well, she greeted him with an energetic wave. Though he couldn't understand why she always appeared so delighted to see him despite their daily meetings, Kirishima returned her smile. "Ijiro, you're early again today." "Well, we can't be late. Besides, I got here early." "When did you arrive?" "Just a few minutes ago." 5. Maybe? I see. It's chilly, so let's not waste time. Okay. Had they been farther away, they might have reached Mustafa the day before and stayed overnight before heading to the exam site. Fortunately, the train journey from Chiba to Mustafa took less than 2 hours. Being considerate of applicants coming from distant areas, the schedule was relaxed enough that they decided to take the first train. After boarding their reserved train, they sat side by side and chatted. Hehe. I'm a little nervous, Ashido admitted. Huh? Why would you be nervous? Is it the written test? They had both already completed the written exam earlier. Kirishima was comfortably within the passing range, while Ashido had found herself teetering on the edge. No, that's over now. Worrying about it won't help. I just heard that the competition is 300-1 again this year, so I'm a bit anxious that the practical might be just as challenging. You worry too much. There's no way you won't pass. Unless an examiner loses it and fails you for no reason, you're in. Really? If you say so. Noticing a trace of unease in Ashido's eyes, Kirishima let out a soft chuckle. Though lively and optimistic, she was still young. In Kirishima's eyes, an entrance exam was hardly worth fretting over. This was true even for someone like Ashido. While much of his earlier memory had faded, he clearly recalled the practical exam. It was a test of robot demolition, and knowing Ashido's quirk, where she had to be careful not to inflict excessive damage on people, he was sure she would enjoy it. At the very least, I know you'd pass even if your score were cut in half. The person I trained wouldn't fail a high school entrance practical, Kirishima remarked confidently. Really? If Ijiro says so, then I guess I'll be fine. You, me, and Bakugo are definitely in the safe zone. Midoriya, well, I'm not so sure about him. Oh, is Midoriya still having trouble controlling it? Yeah, I get it. He suddenly got a quirk, and its output is terrifying. It's about on my level, so of course it wouldn't be easy for him to handle. Unlike the original story, Midoriya had acquired one for all much sooner, yet he still struggled with its control. Kirishima wished he could help, but advising him on mastering such an unpredictable power was easier said than done. It was like handing wings to someone who had never flown and expecting him to know exactly how to flap them. Even then, that idiot is still so slow, though when inspiration strikes, he tends to grow quickly. Still, at his core, he treats his quirk like it's just some flashy finishing move. Ahaha, what can you do? Midoriya has had his quirk for less than a year. True enough, still too slow, and he learned from me of all people. TCH. Kirishima couldn't really teach someone the feel for using a quirk, though he had shown him how to move his body efficiently. In his previous life, Midoriya might have been comparable to a mediocre third-rate athlete in terms of physical control. Seeing him still struggle to adjust his power was infuriating. Though neither All Might nor Midoriya was as destructive as before, rumor had it that they no longer shattered limbs with every activation. Kirishima still found the lack of finesse unacceptable. TCH, he'll figure it out on his own. He may be a bit immature and naive, but his combat instinct isn't bad. You really do worry about him, huh? Ijiro, you can be surprisingly kind. This comment drew a playful retort. I've known him since he was 5. It'd be strange not to worry. Do I always seem so cold-blooded? Not at all. No one has a hotter heart than Ijiro. Even when you act all calm, that passion shows. That's what I admire. For a moment, Kirishima contemplated detaching Ashido from his side. But with the exam nearly upon them, he let her be. Soon, the train pulled into Mustafa. The two of them disembarked and headed toward UA along a route they had traveled before. In front of the imposing UA building big enough to seem more than just a high school, they waited for Midoriya and Bakugo. Surrounded by busts of past UA heroes, they found their designated area. After a short wait, 2 familiar figures appeared. Why the hell do I have to go with you? Damn Deku, Bakugo grumbled. Because Kirishima-chan called for the 4 of us. Me, you, and Kaken. Midoriya shot back in his characteristically cheeky tone. The bickering made Kirishima smile softly. Some things never changed. Even if they grew older, these two idiots would likely remain the same. Since you're here, at least say hello. Why are you always fighting? Exactly. Stop picking on Midoriya already, Bakugo. I'm picking on Deku? Are you blind, you black-eyed bastard? I can see just fine, which is why I'm saying it. Ha! Kaken's always grumbling, isn't he? Though I must say, he's gotten a lot nicer. Nice? Have all the good guys died off? You call him nice? Ugh. I'm the idiot for even talking with you lot. I'm off. Go have fun without me. Yeah, we've seen your face. That's enough. You don't even look nervous. Do your best on the exam. Bakugo scowled, waved a dismissive hand, and stormed off. Smirking at Bakugo's typical behavior, Kirishima was about to lead the others inside when he said, "Let's go. No need to dawdle here. After the exam, let's grab some food together." Yeah. It's been half a year since I saw Midoriya and Bakugo, so we definitely need to eat. Since I'm the guest, Midoriya's buying, right? Huh? Oh yeah, let's get inside. We need to take our first step as heroes properly. Midoriya, flustered by Ishido's words, quickly joined in and strode forward. Ever the clumsy one, he nearly tripped over his own feet, but a passing girl reached out at just the right moment, preventing his fall. As Kirishima, still holding onto Midoriya's floating arm, glanced at her, she beamed brightly. That's my quirk. Sorry for not warning you, but if you fall, it would just be bad luck. Do you think I overstepped? No, it's better than letting you take a spill, Kirishima replied. Really? Thanks for saying that. Are you nervous? Yeah, I guess. Then let's both do our best. The girl with the warm, round face offered a few encouraging words to a stammering Midoriya before moving ahead. Kirishima sighed as he watched the hopeless guy who still had no clue about girls. He wondered when that idiot would ever grow into someone reliable. Yet even with all his goofiness, when it came time to fight, Midoriya unleashed a blazing heroic side that made him undeniably a protagonist. Did you fall for her? Huh? No. If not, then why are you stuttering? TCH, we're going to be late. Let's move. Huh? Is Midoriya's first love about to hit him right in the heart? No. Kirishima and Ishido ribbed Midoriya playfully as they entered the large auditorium where exam instructions were being given. The auditorium, arranged in a circular pattern around a central stage, had seats designated by school affiliation. Kirishima and Ishido found their spots after spotting Midoriya sitting beside the already arrived Bakugo. Soon, the room dimmed, and a man with a bold hairstyle and beard, almost as if they should be torn off by hand, stepped onto the stage wearing sunglasses. Examinee listeners, welcome to my live show today. Everybody, say hey. As expected, no one answered. Undeterred by the silence, he carried on with unabashed confidence. How lonely, right? Then let me present the outline of the practical exam for all you examinee listeners. Are you ready? Yeah. Watching the overly energetic man, Kirishima narrowed his eyes. He wasn't a fan of all the raucous noise, though Ishido seemed to find the performance amusing. According to the exam guidelines, the listeners will participate in a 10-minute mock urban combat test. Personal belongings are allowed. After this presentation, proceed to your designated test sites. Kirishima checked the test site assigned to him. It was different from the one Ishido had received. Looks like they don't want students from the same school working together. Yeah, they're probably just assessing individual capability. More importantly, let's keep quiet. Okay. After responding quietly to Ishido's whisper, the man continued. There are 3 types of mock villains deployed in the test areas, with points awarded according to how difficult it is to neutralize each one. The exam is to tally points by using your quirk to incapacitate these mock villains. Of course, anti-hero actions like attacking others are strictly prohibited. Okay, may I ask a question? No sooner had he finished speaking than a hand shot up. Kirishima's eyes narrowed as he recognized the distinctly square-faced boy. He remembered him well. The handout lists 4 types of villains. If that's an error, it would be downright shameful for UA, Japan's finest, to have such sloppy conduct. We examinees are here to learn from exemplary heroes. And you, curly-haired kid, have been whispering and distracting everyone since the start. If you're just a tourist, then leave immediately.
I'm sorry.
The square-faced boy, speaking in a stiff, precise tone, pointed out the omission in the speaker's announcement. Then he glared at Midoriya and Bakugo, who had been bickering loudly enough for everyone to hear, before briefly glancing at Ishido and Kirishima, and finally turning back. Kirishima snorted. He recalled that this kid was likely pretty strong, though he certainly couldn't be compared to the current Kirishima. As he watched Midoriya shrink into himself and answer meekly, Kirishima clicked his tongue. Bakugo had progressed to the point of casually teasing others, yet that idiot still lacked true confidence. All right. Examinee number 7111. Thanks for the info. The 4th villain is worth 0 points. It's basically just a nuisance, 1 per venue, meant to create a cramped, chaotic distraction. I'd advise you to steer clear of it if possible. Thank you. Excuse me. The square-faced boy bowed rigidly at a perfect right angle before returning to his seat. That's all from me. Lastly, let me recite our school motto for you listeners. As the great hero Napoleon Bonaparte once said, "A true hero is someone who overcomes life's hardships, always striving for a greater horizon."
Plus ultra.
Kirishima snorted at the proclamation, muttering, "So what happened to Napoleon in the end? What a poor example." "Huh? Ijiro, what was that?" "Nothing," he replied dismissively, lost in thought about heroes who grew great only to fail in dying gloriously. Ishido's question went unanswered as the presentation ended. After the session, Kirishima changed clothes, parted ways with Ishido, and headed for his designated test site. The grounds were so vast that he had to catch a bus. Clad in comfortable training attire, he mingled briefly with the other examinees until an announcement boomed over the speakers. "Now start!" Immediately, Kirishima sprang into action. His enhanced field of vision, now extending a full 50 meters, captured every detail around him. What's the matter? In a real battle, there's no countdown. Run! Run! Hearing the delayed scramble of fellow examinees, he increased his pace. Leaving behind faint afterimages, he barreled through and demolished the robot assigned as a villain target with impressive speed. Too weak, as expected, he muttered quietly as he watched a robot shatter and fly apart from a single powerful blow. The level of opposition was far too low. By the look of it, he could easily secure a monopoly of points even with his eyes closed. In under 3 minutes, Kirishima had accumulated over 100 points, so he eased his tempo. While he couldn't tell exactly how many robots were in play, the situation appeared safe enough. Casually strolling along streets designed to mimic an urban battleground, he kept smashing any robot that charged at him. Then, with a thunderous roar, a giant robot emerged from atop a building, its massive form revealing itself as fragments flew in every direction. Among the debris were shards hurtling toward a girl, one with bright green, vine-like hair who had just taken down a robot. She hadn't even had time to react. Spotting a large chunk the size of an average person's upper body, Kirishima instantly shifted his focus. Beyond the clouds of shattered concrete, the girl finally turned, and her eyes met his. Incoming? Good morning," she said with a playful grin. With a smile, Kirishima directed his gaze toward the giant robot and remarked calmly. Even as its eyes glowed ominously, he remained unruffled. Gazing at the broad, sturdy back of the behemoth as it shielded her from danger. The girl thought only one thing. He looked like a god. Kirishima Ijiro. Height 2 meters. Weight 108 kilograms.
Wingspan 212 Zentimeter.
Power A+, speed S, technique S, intelligence C, pride A+. The thing about the stats in My Hero Academia is that their standards are rather inconsistent, and even characters sharing identical ratings can differ greatly in practical ability. For example, Yaoyorozu and All Might are both rated with S-rank intelligence, while Overhaul sports a C-rank in power. Consider Prime All Might. Despite having S+ power and speed on paper, and being notably behind in technique, he still managed to overwhelm All for One. This shows that while the numbers provide a rough guideline, they don't fully capture a character's true capabilities. So please regard these stats as rough approximations, not exact measures. Power. I debated for a while whether to rate Power as A or A+. Ultimately, because Rikido Sato's second official character book lists his power stat as A, I awarded Kirishima an A+. At this point, Kirishima clearly surpasses Sato in terms of raw strength. I did hesitate somewhat since Redestro is rated A+, but I simply wouldn't have done him justice. Speed. In boxing, speed is split into two components: the quickness of the hands, attack speed, and the overall body speed. The term high velocity can be a bit ambiguous. Rapid-fire combinations or swift body movements might both be described that way, so it's not an easy concept to neatly define. For Kirishima, his hand speed is undeniably S-rank and even at the top of that echelon, while his body speed is slightly lower, around A+. Taking everything into account, his overall speed is rated S. Technique. When it comes to technical skill, Kirishima stands at the pinnacle among modern martial heroes. In a pure hand-to-hand brawl, he can even be compared to All Might. This edge largely comes from their differing temperaments. While All Might tends to rely on straightforward brute force, Kirishima adapts his tactics on the fly. He can circle around to land quick, precise strikes before darting away, or close in and overwhelm an opponent with a barrage of blows. Depending on the situation, he might even engage in extremely close combat, using sharp knees or elbows to cut through an opponent's defense. Moreover, with his keen spatial awareness and insight, he's capable of taking on foes who are faster and stronger than he is, while his innate resistance to quirk effects helps nullify specialized attacks. Now that I've laid it all out, he truly does come off as a monstrous cheat. The reason he isn't rated S+ is simply that he lacks experience in combat forms beyond pure hand-to-hand fighting. He's never faced the challenges of aerial or underwater combat, or battles where a wide array of quirks are in play. Thus, S is the best fit. Intelligence. Much like in the original, this Kirishima isn't known for his academic brilliance. The reason he can comfortably enter UA with stellar grades is solely because he's already experienced this life once before. Having honed his athletic skills in the United States, a place where only those with adequate grades can even compete, and having studied diligently in high school for the sake of a mentor in his previous life, he now manages excellent grades. Still, his capacity for learning remains rather limited. If we focus on combat intelligence rather than overall smarts, he's certainly proficient, but only insofar as it pertains to his own physical movements. Kirishima has no knack for tactics or strategy, so I've settled on a rating of C.
Pride.
There isn't much to say here. Kirishima takes great pride in his strength and martial prowess, yet he remains neither arrogant nor self-righteous. He willingly shows respect by bowing to those he deems worthy. As noted in the title, these stats reflect Kirishima's abilities as of Chapter 42. I'll be compiling and posting updated stats for his current status in the original canon soon, but explaining them now might spoil some surprises. The massive robot, wedged between buildings and rising defiantly through a narrow gap, exuded an imposing aura. Every step of that multi-ton machine shattered the concrete beneath it, and its sweeping gestures felled forests of rebar and concrete as effortlessly as crushing tofu. Its glowing red eyes, scanning for prey, seemed determined to miss nothing. The raw violence of that colossal mass, now intruding on the exam grounds, felt utterly absurd for examinees who hadn't even enrolled in the hero course yet. It's all just bluster. That thing's nothing more than a super-obese lump that can barely keep itself upright. Kirishima snorted derisively at the remark. That oversized, seemingly useless robot was nothing more than an easy target. If anyone had developed such a flawed contraption and dared to call it a weapon, they would have been fired without hesitation. In days long past, when hatred begot only more hatred and human lives were valued less than insects, there was an era when human malice swelled to monstrous proportions in its quest for mutual destruction. Had one dared to present such an ill-conceived contraption to the incarnations of violence that defined that time, it would have served as nothing more than a convenient target. And needless to say, the same went for those steel beasts that once roamed battlefields as symbols of carnage and omens of despair. Kirishima's fists, blazing with fiery intensity, were by no means inferior to the fangs of a tank, once a rampaging beast that spat fire and roared like clanging bells. In fact, while that monstrous machine had to pause for breath after each burst, Kirishima's fists, unleashed dozens of times per second, were the very embodiment of calamity and retribution. There might be no point, but it's such an eyesore that I feel compelled to smash it. Someone's bound to get hurt because of that thing. The moment his words faded, Kirishima Powerful kicked the ground. If his opponent was nothing more than this defective product, there was no need for any fancy new technique. In a flash, his body entered the realm of pure speed and positioned itself beneath the robot's feet, outpacing human perception. A sudden, jarring deceleration forced his weight onto his front leg, and the cement floor splintered under the pressure. The energy that might have thrown him backward twisted through his waist, coursed over his shoulder, and erupted from his outstretched fist. With a deafening boom, Kirishima's punch struck the robot's foot. The mangled foot was torn away, leaving the machine with nothing below the ankle. As the contraption lost its balance and toppled sideways, Kirishima grinned, baring his teeth like fangs. So, farewell. I hope that in your next life, you're born not as a pathetic robot, but as something worth fighting for. Like cannon fire, his fists rained down relentlessly, each strike shattering the moment. When the thunderous impacts finally subsided amidst swirling dust, the machine was no longer a robot. It had been reduced to nothing more than a heap of scrap metal. Kirishima whistled at the sight of what had once been a robot. Phew. Not particularly practical, but still impressive. To think they've stationed one of these at every exam site, you've got to wonder about their budget. What on earth is that? Is that a person? While other examinees murmured at the sight, Kirishima paid them no mind. Being the subject of such attention was nothing new to him, a condition he'd been accustomed to since his previous life. After all, if he was destined to become stronger than everyone else, such scrutiny would only grow more frequent. The girl with vine-like hair covered her mouth as she watched him. He seemed to shine, not because of the dazzling sun overhead, but because of the boy whose overwhelming strength had rescued her. His large, powerful figure evoked the image of a shepherd arriving just in time to save a lamb. Ah, so strong. Just as she gathered herself to approach Kirishima, a distracted voice burst from the speaker, announcing the end of the exam. All right, time's up. That's it. Everyone, return to the entrance. Those with serious injuries can wait for treatment on site, and those with minor injuries should come to the entrance for care. The instant the announcement sounded, Kirishima strode toward the entrance without a hint of hesitation. From behind his determined steps, the girl's voice called out, "Hey, wait a minute. Huh? Oh, you're the girl from earlier, right? Are you hurt anywhere? I'm sorry. I should have checked on you first. Oh, such kindness. No, more importantly, thank you. Thanks to you, I'm completely unharmed. Haha, that's a relief. And your quirk was pretty spectacular, too. I got a great look at it. That's your line. Oh, excuse me. I should have introduced myself first.
I'm Shozaki Aibere.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
I'm Kirishima Eiro.
The two then walked side by side. So, how did you score? And hey, why not drop the formalities? We're about the same age, aren't we? I actually prefer speaking politely. As for points, I managed to snag quite a few. Probably 46 points. Really? That should be enough to pass, I guess. By the way, may I ask where you're from, benefactor? Kirishima cocked his head at the question about his hometown, yet he answered nonetheless. He considered it nothing more than an icebreaker. It might not have been the most conventional topic for Japan, but given her formal manner, he figured she was simply a bit awkward in social situations. After all, there were those like Midoriya who stumbled over their words when talking to girls. In comparison, she was perfectly composed. I'm from Chiba Prefecture, she said. I see. When the conversation stalled, Kirishima tilted his head once more. Wasn't she meant to mention where she was from as well? And where are you from? Shiozaki? Ah, I'm from Kanagawa. Really? That's pretty close, although not as close as Tokyo. After their chat, Kirishima learned that Shiozaki was a devout believer. Perhaps that explained her frequent use of biblical expressions. In retrospect, encountering such a person wasn't entirely foreign to him. In Japan, Christians were rare enough and fervent believers even more so, making her quite an uncommon sort. After a short walk, the entrance finally came into view. There, Kirishima noticed a child trudging toward the entrance with slumped shoulders. Oddly, the child's head resembled a cluster of grapes. Though his stature clearly marked him as a kid, the fact that he was taking the exam suggested he was of similar age to the others. Observing the forlorn look on his face, as if he'd fared poorly on the test, Kirishima clicked his tongue. Tisk. Looks like a lot of people didn't do well. Well, it can't be helped. With competition this fierce, it's only natural for many to be dissatisfied with the results. True enough. Still, I don't think this exam is particularly fair. Is it because the test subjects are robots? Yeah, mental type quirks are practically ruled out from the start, and those with weaker physical abilities are at a disadvantage. That may be true, but you can't please everyone. I agree, yet I believe a more balanced test would be preferable. Honestly, if you aim to be a hero, you should at least be able to take down a point-granting robot without relying on your quirk. Still, even with that in mind, I suspect many worthy candidates might be overlooked. Shiozaki didn't entirely disagree with Kirishima's assessment, though she couldn't fully sympathize. Perhaps, as an examinee, she wasn't eager to face even more competition. After all, even in the current exam, someone as formidable as Kirishima could dominate the point tally. If every quirk were allowed to show its full strength, how many more competitors would emerge? Before she knew it, the two had reached the bus and taken seats side by side. Noticing that Shiozaki seemed full of questions but hesitant to speak up, Kirishima smiled. This new friend, who might soon become a classmate, had an unconventional personality, but she wasn't unpleasant by any means. After spending 10 years around Bakugo, Kirishima found almost every personality saintly. By his measure, she was definitely one of the good ones. Kirishima continued chatting with her as he waited for the bus to depart. She was the first new friend he had made at UA. The practical exam results are out. In a dim room lit solely by monitors, people sat with their eyes fixed on the screens. They discussed the exam results in calm, measured tones. It's been ages since an examinee surpassed 100 points, and he was actively hunting villains for only about the first 3 minutes. Whether it was out of consideration for his competitors or simply a loss of interest, it's hard to say. The examinee they all referred to was, of course, Kirishima. The monitor replayed footage of Kirishima moving at an incredible pace, demolishing robots wherever he went. Even in slow motion, his form was barely discernible, prompting awed murmurs. And let's not overlook the giant villain, right? We've seen examinees confront giant villains before, but it's been a long time since I witnessed one being so effortlessly crushed. He handled it as if it were just routine, completely at ease. It was truly impressive. His power, his speed, nothing was lacking. His judgment was sharp, and the way he singled out villains without hesitation suggested a remarkable instinct. Honestly, based solely on combatability, he'd be worthy of a hero license right now. And the fact that he rescued another examinee shows he isn't self-serving. In every respect, he was the standout performer on this exam. Amid the continuous praise for Kirishima, one voice steered the conversation elsewhere. Left unchecked, the accolades for Kirishima might have stretched into eternity. While there was no doubt about Kirishima's prowess, fair judgment required discussing the other examinees rather than dwelling solely on the undisputed top scorer. Speaking of giant villains, we mustn't forget the examinee who placed 7th. Yes, that boy was remarkable as well. 7th place with 0 villain points, though our grading might have been generous, it still seems absurd. Anyone else who heard it might have suspected favoritism. He acted in a manner truly fit for a hero, so such a reward was well-deserved. Midoriya's footage then dominated the screen, showing him leaping at a giant robot and knocking it down with a punch. At first, his brief retreat followed by an immediate turnaround only added to his charm. He clearly seemed intimidated by the giant villain, and that's exactly what makes his actions all the more meaningful. Anyone can charge at an easy target. Exactly. The hesitation I saw suggested that the possibility of failing the exam flitted through his mind. Still, by choosing to save someone, I believe his mindset crowned him as the true number 1. But breaking his arm with a single blow is a bit extreme. As someone observed Midoriya clutching his dangling arm while tumbling down, the comment was made. Though Midoriya's face was set in a determined, resolute expression, the scene betrayed a hint of instability. To suffer such a severe injury from his own recoil, he looks like a kid who's just awakened his quirk. Still, his output was as impressive as that of the top performer, perhaps even surpassing it. I have high hopes for the day he masters his quirk. Alright, let's move on. Next up is the boy who clinched 2nd place solely with villain points, with not a single rescue point to his name. Bakugo then appeared on the screen that had been showing Midoriya. Bakugo's adept demolition of robots presented a sharp contrast to Midoriya's approach. That boy was impressive as well. Honestly, he didn't seem like a typical middle schooler, except when compared to the top scorer. That boy is an outright anomaly, we can't really compare him. Even now, he's practically a complete package, and it wouldn't be fair to pit him against the examinees or vice versa. That's true. Bakugo has excellent combat instincts. It was probably his first time using his quirk directly in battle. For a child raised in a normal Japanese environment, that milestone is bound to be a first. His identity is well established, so there's no need to worry. After a brief mention of Kirishima, the conversation shifted back to Bakugo. They marveled at how he corralled robots with explosive force and dispatched them with ease. The way he quickly deciphered the robot's targeting mechanism and coordinated his attacks left no doubt that he was far beyond the typical middle schooler. After several rounds of praise for Bakugo, the discussion moved on to the next examinee. The process of selecting the shining stars destined to light up the new era continued in the dim glow of the room. After parting with Shiozaki, meeting the younger students for a meal, and returning home, Kirishima's life remained largely unchanged. As always, he trained and studied diligently, kept an eye on Ishido, and quietly assured Izuku, whose spirit was wavering, that success was within reach. The only noticeable change was that he began to spend more time with his parents before they would soon be far away. In the blink of an eye, a week passed, and a letter arrived at Kirishima's home. Taking the envelope marked UA from the doorstep, Kirishima brought it inside and opened it after dinner, with his parents gathered around. Greetings. I'm Nizu, the principal of UA. A face, indistinguishable as either a mouse or a bear, popped out from a round device, startling his parents. Only Kirishima, who already knew that exam results would be announced via hologram, regarded the scene with impassive eyes. As you might expect, Kirishima-kun, your exam results were 108 villain points and 15 rescue points, placing you at the top. At Nizu's announcement, Kirishima's parents embraced each other in celebration. They had always believed in his abilities, though a trace of anxiety lingered in their hearts. But all such worries vanished in the wake of Kirishima's triumph. The son who had trained relentlessly from childhood, as if perpetually pursued, had finally reaped the rewards of his hard work. Both his parents felt their hearts swell with unbidden tears of joy. I know you're curious, since I haven't explained everything. The exam awarded not only points for defeating villains, but also for rescuing people. The examiners evaluated each candidate's actions and aggregated the scores accordingly. Maintaining his usual calm demeanor, Kirishima continued watching the screen as Nizu elaborated. Thus, your total score, Kirishima-kun, came to 123 points, the second highest score in history, surpassing even previous records. I suppose I could have taken down a few more. We are truly delighted that such an outstanding talent as you has applied to UA. Hopefully, next time we'll have the chance to meet face to face on campus. In any case, congratulations, you have been accepted. Welcome to your hero academia. With those words, Nizu vanished. Kirishima's parents rushed forward and enveloped him in a warm embrace. Seeing their tearful, smiling faces, he returned the embrace with equal joy. A family that willingly shared both pain and joy was a treasure beyond measure. The first step toward becoming a hero felt as warming and comforting as a cup of coffee on a chilly winter day. It was a moment destined to become legend. A humble beginning blossoming within a modest family home, interwoven with both tears and laughter.
And that concludes this episode. If you enjoyed it, I'd seriously love it if you guys could leave a like on the video, as it genuinely helps out so much, and it keeps me going. Plus, it takes only 1 second. That said, have a wonderful day. See you in the next one.